passed, and El and his family moved to a small cottage near the mountains. They spent their days in peace, far from greedy rulers. The sun shone brightly, smoke rose from their chimney, and everything felt calm and serene. El tapped his finger on the table as he thought about his future plans. He tucked a book into his subspace bag and reflected on his actions. He had destroyed the Einhard estate, defeated his uncle and grandfather, and seriously injured the prince both inside and out. El knew these deeds made him a criminal, and that he couldn't return to Banzar, his original goal, without causing more problems. Looking out the window at the bright sunlight, El accepted that the kingdom would be justified in hunting him down, yet he also knew they wouldn't dare because his memory magic could expose their darkest secrets. Standing by the window and enjoying the peaceful view, El thought about what he had learned during the battles. His spellcasting speed, preparation time, and ability to combine spells were far ahead of any other mage on the continent. Confident in his growing strength, El believed he would become even more powerful if he mastered a few more support spells. He realized how incredible Tana, his Golden Knight Golem, truly was. He remembered how Tana had even managed to defeat the Grand Master Duke for a short while. The 5 years he had spent training and improving his skills, as well as working on Tana, were finally paying off. All the hard work he had put into himself and his golem had been worth it. He believed that if he could build more golems like Tana, he could one day conquer the entire world with such an army. However, he also understood that it would take 3 years to make a golem like Tana, and the cost of creating one was incredibly high, making it difficult to afford. El also learned an important lesson from his fight with the Marquis and his son. Teamwork was more powerful than fighting alone. He realized there were some problems he couldn't solve by himself, and that sometimes he had to accept help from others. After the battle, rumors about El spread across the world. Many nations began sending people to search for him, but El suspected that not all of them had good intentions. Some of them might want to harm him. As he rested his head on his hands, he thought about how much stronger he needed to become before these people could catch up to him. However, he wasn't sure how to achieve that yet. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. When El turned, his mother stood there and asked if she could come in. He invited her inside, and she entered with his 2 sisters, Serena and Kana. Serena and Kana looked cheerful, but their mother seemed worried and a little sad. "What's wrong?" El asked. Ever since the incident, everyone had felt uneasy and needed time to process what had happened. His mother fidgeted nervously, playing with her hands, and hesitantly asked El how he had become so strong. El told her he had kept his strength hidden because he knew no one would believe he could be that powerful at such a young age. He also admitted that he had been afraid of putting her in danger if the wrong people learned about his abilities. However, he didn't tell his family the full truth, like the fact that he had lived another life in a different world. Instead, he reassured his mother by saying he was still her son. Despite her earlier doubts, his mother believed him. She smiled softly, realizing he was still the son she loved, raised and shared with her late husband. She apologized for treating him differently and said she understood he had his reasons. El tried to lighten the mood by joking about becoming famous if he revealed himself as a magic prodigy. His mother laughed and told him to stay humble. El continued joking with his family before telling them he had something important to discuss. His sisters became curious and asked what he wanted to talk about. El explained that because of what happened at the Einhard family estate, they couldn't return to Banzar. He showed them a spot on a map and said he had been thinking about their next steps. He described how the western part of the Sarian continent was made up of 5 kingdoms and had many mage towers. However, most of the smaller nations in the west were weak, with few mage towers. With a bright smile, El excitedly announced his plan to build his own magical tower there. Kana looked confused and asked if she had heard correctly. Did he really want to build his own magical tower? El explained that it would be similar to the one in their hometown, where the Tower Master lived. He told them that only a level 7 mage could create such a structure. He also explained that a magical tower could destroy thousands of soldiers during a war, making it incredibly valuable. Because of this, nations would be eager to fund its construction. Kana was amazed by the idea, while her sister asked El where he planned to build such a tower. El pointed to a spot on the map and explained it was a small area in a place called Toan Kingdom. The Toan Kingdom was a big region with rich soil, a large population, and a stronger army compared to the nearby countries. He spoke highly of the kingdom, noting it was powerful but didn't yet have a mage tower. He added that the nearby areas were home to dangerous monsters, causing the people to suffer heavy losses every year, especially in a small region known as Manticore Valley. El suggested that if they offered to eliminate the monsters for the Torn Kingdom, the kingdom would likely appreciate it. El's mother asked if there was more to his plan and thought about what she might say. El went on to explain that the king was a good leader and trusted by his advisors. However, there was a problem with the king's sons, who were arguing among themselves, and the king was unable to resolve their conflicts. El's mother asked if this dispute would affect his plans. El replied that it wasn't important to his idea, as the princes, being mages who craved power, wouldn't interfere. He added that mage towers usually stayed out of politics, so their involvement wouldn't be an issue. The real challenge, he said, would be dealing with the monsters in Manor Valley and the nearby Orc Forest. El believed the kingdom's army could handle the Orc Forest, but if they focused all their forces there, they wouldn't have enough to clear Manor Valley. That's why El wanted to take charge of the valley himself, and if he succeeded, it could increase the kingdom's influence. Kana, El's mother, and Serena stood quietly, thinking over the plan. Finally, Kana found her voice and asked El if they could also find her a master to teach her swordsmanship. El admitted it was a good idea. While he could teach her some breathing techniques, he wasn't skilled enough in swordsmanship to train her further. He assured her they could find a teacher in the kingdom, given its strong military. Kana was thrilled and thanked him. Serena, too, wanted to grow stronger. She asked El if he could continue teaching her, explaining with folded hands how helpless she had felt during the battle at the Einhart family estate. She had thought she could defend herself, but realized she wasn't as strong as she believed after seeing Elle fight against the Marquis and his son. Determined, she expressed her desire to improve. Elle was surprised but happy to hear this and eagerly agreed to help her. Their mother also expressed interest in learning and asked Elle to teach her as well. Elle joked, "Maybe you should start using your brain, that would help a lot." Everyone laughed and looked at him with joy, united in their wish to grow stronger. Elle promised to help them all and smiled as they agreed. It was time to leave their comfortable home and get ready for the journey to Towain Kingdom. In the forest nearby, faint noises echoed. The king of Towain Kingdom, traveling with his gods, paused on the path. Hearing the sounds nervously, they scanned the area to find the source. One of the gods warned the king to be cautious, noting that monster activity in the forest was unusually high. The king worried if his people could remain safe under such conditions and wondered if anyone would rise to protect them. Suddenly, a dark, shadowy figure that resembled a devil appeared, watching them. Despite the danger, the king and his guards pressed on. Eventually, they reached a cliff that offered a breathtaking view of the Towain Kingdom. The kingdom was located in the middle of the sea, surrounded by small mountains. It had a little harbor and a bridge that connected it to the mainland. The king sat on the edge of a cliff, lost in thought, when a man came up behind him. It was Duke Liars, a friend of the king, who asked him what was on his mind. He wondered if the king was troubled or if there were any problems. The king, looking worried, shared that he was thinking about his 3 sons. He explained how the rivalry between them over who would become the next king was getting worse each day. He feared that this conflict might one day harm the kingdom. Liars knelt before the king and tried to console him. He compared the situation to rain nourishing the earth, saying he believed that the conflict might somehow bring strength and unity to the kingdom. Liars also suggested that the king should choose his 3rd son, Prince Eudemion, as the crown prince for the good of the realm. Just as Liars began to talk about whether the king should choose Prince Maxel or Prince Cran instead, the king interrupted him with a sigh. The king admitted that Maxel treated people like objects and had a violent and cruel nature. Similarly, Cran had many of Maxel's traits, though they were not as obvious. The king concluded that neither Maxel nor Cran was fit to rule. Instead, he felt that Eudemion, his youngest son, was kind and caring, the leader the people needed, and the one the king wanted as his successor. However, most of the noble class supported either Maxel or Cran. Eudemion did have some strong supporters, including Duke Liars, who led the royal guard, and Count Lumo, the capital's swordmaster. Their support created some balance among the 3 princes, as 2 important leaders sided with Eudemion. Even so, the king worried about what might happen if Maxel and Cran turned against their younger brother. The very thought gave him a headache. This ongoing struggle over succession made it hard for the king to focus on governing, especially as monsters from the forest continued attacking his people. The king held his head, struggling to keep calm despite everything weighing on him. He knew he had to manage both the kingdom and the growing threat of monsters. Lost in thought, he suddenly realized he had been talking to himself and wondered where Duke Liars had gone. Turning around, he saw Liars and his guards standing tensely, ready to protect him. Liars drew his sword and warned the king to stay back. The guards noticed they were surrounded. One guard asked if they were surrounded by monsters, but another guard smirked suspiciously before attacking him. The king and Duke Liars were shocked. Liars demanded to know why the guard had killed his comrade. The traitorous guard revealed that they had been enemies all along, and more traitors appeared from the bushes. Liars stood in front of the king and ordered the loyal guards to protect him. The treacherous guard threatened the king, saying it was only a matter of time before they captured him. Pointing her sword at the king, she vowed to kill him herself. The king, heartbroken by the betrayal, knelt by the cliff's edge and asked his god if he had abandoned him and the kingdom. Meanwhile, in a magical tower, a tower master sat at a table, speaking with 2 others through enchanted screens covered in runes. One of the other mages asked why this meeting had been called, especially without their master present. The mage at the table was Korosin, the magic tower master, known for his fiery red beard, mustache, and hair. An impatient mage on the screen remarked that he hoped Korosin hadn't forgotten how busy they all were and how little time they had for meetings. Ghostman explained that their master had asked him to organize this meeting to share some important updates with them. He pointed to the first key detail, saying the plan to kill the king of Towain Kingdom in Manticore Village was already in motion. Once the king was dead, the first prince, Maxel, would take the throne and control everything. Risen, a maid sitting on the other side of the screen, suggested they should use their golems to clear the surrounding areas of monsters and rely on the military to take over nearby nations. Pushing his glasses up, Ryzen added that the task would be simple for their golems since they were the strongest on the continent. Cosman then mentioned that their master had also learned about a night golem in the Blard Kingdom. This news left Ryzen shocked, as he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He questioned what it meant and wondered who else could have created such a golem besides himself. Cosman explained that a significant event had occurred in the Einhart family involving a 7th-level mage and his night golem. Risen was shocked again, his eyes wide with disbelief. Cosman explained to the other 2 mages that the night golem's power was at least at the Grand Master level and that it even had its own consciousness. Risen, speechless, stroked his beard while trying to process the information. He explained that if his Auroron was destroyed, he couldn't create a night golem, and even a regular golem would take him about 30 days to make. He was astounded that someone else could make a night golem, especially one as powerful as a Grand Master and with consciousness. Cosman added that this was only part of the problem, since creating such a golem would take years, not days. However, he said they couldn't afford to sit idle. Cosmin instructed Ryzen to investigate and gather information about this golem, making sure Ryzen understood the importance of his task. Determined, Ryzen agreed to do everything he could to find the person responsible and speak to them in person. While the king faced an ambush and Cosmin, Ryzen, and the third mage discussed their sinister plans, El, the protagonist, was lying on a wall, relaxing. He realized he had arrived in Toan Kingdom, but wasn't sure how to meet the king. He knew spreading rumors about his presence would be risky, since it could attract the Einhard family from Blard Kingdom, exposing his location. El wanted to meet the king casually, without drawing attention, but couldn't figure out how to do it. Frustrated, he lay back on the wall, wondering what to do next. El's mother, standing nearby with his sisters, mentioned she was hungry and suggested they find somewhere to eat. El stood up and agreed. Suddenly, he felt a surge of energy, hitting him like a lightning bolt. He recognized the energy as coming from a sword master. Jumping to his feet, he realized the power was coming from the north. His mother noticed his reaction and asked him what was wrong, but El ignored her. He realized the energy was coming from the forest, a place where no one should be, and it was close to the king's palace. He wondered if the king might be involved. His mother, confused, kept questioning him and calling his name. Apologizing quickly, El floated away, telling his family to go ahead and eat without him. Duke Layers and his loyal guards stood around their king, protecting him with all their might. Unlike others, they remained faithful and were not traitors. Layers soon noticed that many enemies were using the darkness to their advantage, launching surprise attacks on King Bush. He realized the danger was growing, and if things didn't change quickly, the king could be killed. Suddenly, one enemy knight charged at the king, shouting his name and swinging a sword directly at him. The king thought this might be the end, but just in time, El created a magical shield in front of him. The king, who had rolled away, was amazed as the shield blocked the attack. He looked around in shock, trying to figure out what had just saved him. El floated down to the battlefield, clearly upset. He didn't understand much about what was going on, but strongly disliked the idea of someone being attacked so unfairly in the dark. He saw it as a bad sign and wasn't about to let the attackers escape so easily. El glanced at the enemy soldiers and asked mockingly if they needed time to think of excuses. The soldiers said nothing, staying in their fighting positions. El thanked them sarcastically for the opportunity, but made it clear they wouldn't survive. The king and his followers watched in confusion, unsure who El was or why he had appeared at that moment. One of the king's knights pleaded with El to save the king. El was surprised to hear he had just protected the king. Meanwhile, Lyra stayed cautious, warning the knight not to act rashly since El could be an enemy too. El looked at the king and realized he was King Retoff of Tuan Kingdom. He turned his attention to the enemy soldiers and declared he now fully understood the situation. Recognizing the enemy knights targeting the king, he announced he would not forgive their actions. El raised his hand, forming a small, swirling orb of magic with the words misery and destruction. The orb quickly grew into a large portal behind him. From within, large hands began to tear the portal apart, revealing Tana. El summoned his golden knight golem, who stood tall and ready to fight alongside him. The king and duke were amazed by this incredible display of power. Although the king had heard rumors about El, seeing him in action made it hard to believe the stories were about such a young person. Even so, he could feel immense power coming from El and wondered about his true identity. El raised his hand again, creating a small ice crystal, which he launched at the ground. The crystal spread rapidly, freezing the enemy soldiers in place and stopping them from escaping. El declared he could defeat all of them with a single attack, but ordered Tana to leave some alive for questioning. Tana acknowledged the command and prepared to carry it out. The king remained in awe of El's strength and magic, struggling to comprehend the full extent of his abilities. The frozen enemy knights desperately tried to break free, but couldn't even move properly. Tana, following El's orders, charged forward. As she ran, she summoned her golden sword, which appeared in her hand surrounded by flames, just like during the battle at the Einhard family's lands. Wasting no time, Tana swung her sword in a wide horizontal arc, killing the enemy soldiers instantly with a powerful blow. The king and duke were left stunned once more by the overwhelming strength of El and his golem, trying to process the incredible scene they had just witnessed. El thanked his golden golem, Tana, and praised her for her great effort. Tana bowed and thanked him in return. The king realized this must be the mage everyone was talking about. The strongest mage in the Toan Kingdom was currently at the 6th level of magic, but if the king could get El to join his side, he would finally have a 7th level mage in his kingdom. El walked up to the king, asked if he was hurt, and introduced himself. Relieved, the king thanked El for saving him. El said it was no big deal. He had just dealt with a few bad guys. He mentioned he purposefully left some alive so he could question them later to find out who was behind the attack. He hoped this would prevent future ambushes. Meanwhile, the king's guards were busy rounding up the remaining traitors. The king was amazed that El not only saved his life, but also planned ahead so well. He invited El to join him for a meal, saying that just thanking him with words wasn't enough. El acted like he was thinking about it, but finally agreed, which made the king very happy. The king said he would inform his mage about the meeting and order the removal of a seal that blocked teleportation magic so El could visit easily. El thanked him and apologized, saying he needed to leave. He created a magical circle and prepared to teleport. Just before disappearing, El told the king he was looking forward to their meeting tomorrow. Then, he vanished, leaving the king alone at the forest cliff. Afterward, Duke Lyres approached the king, relieved that things had ended so well. He believed the mage and the night golem who had saved them must be connected to the incident at Einhart. Liars also hoped they could help solve the monster problem troubling the kingdom. The king turned to his friend and asked if he thought El could reach the 8th level of magic. Still feeling happy, the king compared the day's events to refreshing rain after a drought. Liars agreed, but joked that it was hard to celebrate since they had almost died. When El returned home and told his family about what had happened, they were shocked that he had casually met the king. He explained that he saved the king from an ambush in the forest and was invited to the royal palace. His mother was surprised but thrilled that he would meet the king. She asked El how he planned to win the king's favor, and Serena and Kana begged him to reveal his plan, but El told them he would share it later. Suddenly, 2 men approached their table. One of them hugged El's mother and flirted with his sisters, asking if they wanted to spend time with him. One of the men touched Serena lightly, but El quickly stepped in. Smiling politely, he asked the man to keep his hands off his family. When the man didn't take him seriously and asked who El was, El's tone became firm as he repeated his warning, gripping the man's hand. Realizing El meant business, the man backed off and promised to leave them alone. He and his friend left the inn. Serena and Kana looked at their brother with admiration, feeling like he had saved them like a hero. Embarrassed, they avoided his gaze. Their mother noticed their reactions and held back a laugh, knowing her daughters were a little scared but also proud of their brother. El, unaware of this, muttered that they should be strong enough to handle such situations on their own. His comment completely ruined the mood, and his mother just shook her head in exasperation. The next morning, bright and sunny like most days before, El said goodbye to his family because he needed to get ready for his meeting with the king. His mother and siblings told him to be careful and said they couldn't wait to see him later. El then used his teleportation magic and appeared at the king's large estate. In the teleportation room, a man was waiting, looking irritated. He had to undo the magic seals that protected the estate from unauthorized teleportation and wondered which important person required this effort. Bored, he leaned on one hand with his legs crossed, waiting for the guest to arrive. Suddenly, he noticed a movement in the center of the room. He stood up quickly and sensed a strong mana aura. Someone with 7th level magic had arrived. He was amazed to see someone so powerful. El appeared and successfully teleported to the king's estate. The waiting man approached El and immediately asked if he was the one who had saved the king's life. El turned to face him and confirmed it. The man, overcome with emotion, hugged El with tears in his eyes, saying that the kingdom would finally have a 7th-class mage again. He expressed relief, saying he felt less burdened now. El was puzzled and had no idea who this man was or why he was acting this way. Feeling uncomfortable, El cleared his throat and indicated he didn't fully understand what was happening. The man realized he was being overbearing and quickly let go, apologizing for his emotional outburst. He explained that he was amazed by El's incredible mana. El listened patiently, but shrugged off the man's excitement. Even though the man stepped back, he couldn't hide his awe at El's youth. He told El he had never seen such a young 7th-class mage before. His admiration was evident, and he kept praising El, who felt awkward and wondered why this man was making such a fuss. Looking around the room, El noticed it was filled with scattered books, many lying open on the floor. Curious, he glanced at them and realized they were mostly about magic. This reminded him of his own childhood, when he devoured every magic book he could find. After a moment, the man apologized again for being rude and mentioned that the king was waiting for El. He offered to take him there and shyly asked if they could talk about magic on the way. El, excited to meet someone who shared his love for magic, agreed. His eyes sparkled as he followed the man, chatting eagerly about their shared passion. As they walked, El demonstrated his abilities by forming a bright blue flame of mana in his hand. The older man was stunned, unable to believe that someone so young could create such strong magic without preparation or spells. He told El he was far beyond the other 7th-class mages. Walking through the castle corridors, the man's mind raced with wild theories about how El could be so powerful. His enthusiasm made El smile as they continued talking. El enjoyed their conversation, finding it refreshing to meet someone as passionate about magic as he was. Suddenly, El's eyes widened. He glanced out of a palace window and saw the harbor below. The view of the city was breathtaking. The water sparkled, waves crashed gently against the harbor, the sun shone brightly, and the whole city seemed calm and peaceful. El could clearly see that this land was full of food, with valuable resources and treasures hidden underground. As he looked out the window, thinking about the benefits of the Toan kingdom and feeling the warm air, the older man muttered something to himself again. This made El curious about why the man was so deep in thought. To end the pondering, El handed him a small piece of paper. It contained a magical theory El had written down while walking through the castle corridors. El explained that there were many connections between magic and mathematics. The older man eagerly grabbed the paper, clearly thrilled. After reading it, he was amazed that such a method existed. He praised El, saying it was valuable and surprisingly simple, yet it formed a solid theory. As they continued walking through the castle halls, El shared that he hadn't planned to reveal this theory publicly. However, he wanted to share it with the older man because he trusted him. El also made it clear by putting a finger to his lips that it had to remain a secret. The older man, with a pinkish complexion, thanked El sincerely. As they slowly made their way to the king waited alone in the large room. He sat at a table, resting his face on one hand while impatiently tapping the table with the other. The king grumbled that Deslin, the pinkish older man, was late again, probably distracted by magic. Just as he finished speaking, someone outside the door announced that El had arrived. The king immediately ordered him to be brought in. Deslin opened the door and let El into the room. El politely apologized for being late. The king stood up happily to greet El, but Deslin stepped in front and declared that El was the mage who would change history. The king told Deslan to calm down, saying he had already seen El's greatness yesterday. He then asked Deslan to leave them alone. Though surprised, Deslan obeyed, apologized to the king, and left. El felt a little puzzled about why the king wanted to talk to him privately. He also realized that he hadn't seen a single knight on his way to this room, nor was there one inside. El wondered if this was deliberate, perhaps to make him feel at ease. Before leaving, Deslan thanked El for sharing his ideas and asked if they could meet again. He wanted to learn more about El's magical discoveries. With a big smile, Deslan bid him farewell and closed the door behind him. The king, now alone with El, shook his head slightly, embarrassed by Deslan's enthusiastic behavior. Okay, everyone, leave a comment about how adorable Deslan is. He's so sweet, the king joked, though a little ashamed. El knelt down, bowing deeply to greet the king with utmost respect. Before he could express his heartfelt thanks, the king touched El's shoulder and addressed him as Sir, before his name. Then, to El's surprise, the king also knelt on both knees and asked El to stand. The king insisted he should be the one giving thanks. He repeated El's words from the day before and thanked him sincerely for saving his life. After showing his gratitude, the king clapped his hands, and servants and maids quickly entered the room with delicious food. The king apologized, saying it might seem rude, but all the dishes would be served at once. The food included ribs, lobster, several types of fish, tasty sauces, and other delicious meals. The king then told El to relax and feel comfortable, adding that they could speak openly. El smiled and thought, King Rudolph seemed like a very thoughtful person who paid attention even to small details. While they ate, the king offered El some alcohol and mentioned he had chosen one of the most popular drinks in the kingdom. El agreed, held out his glass, and thanked the king. Recognizing the king's kindness, El decided to be equally respectful and polite, speaking honestly and without hesitation. El then directly told the king that he thought the reason for inviting him was to build a magic tower in the kingdom. At first, King Rudolph looked shocked, his face showing surprise, but his expression soon became serious, and he confirmed El's guess. The king explained that the tower wasn't just about gaining power, but also about protecting the kingdom from monsters that attacked every year, killing thousands of people. He admitted this was the main reason he had invited El to the castle, even though he found it embarrassing to ask. King Rudolph went on to explain that the kingdom was divided into 3 parts. He said the first and second princes had joined forces and now controlled more than half of the kingdom. He added that internal conflict could break out at any time. Meanwhile, with the princes focused on strengthening their armies, the monsters in the west were causing destruction without being stopped. Rudolph shared that he wanted a peaceful kingdom where his people could live safely and happily. To make this happen, the monsters needed to be eliminated. He also said that building a magic tower could prevent future wars with other nations. Finally, Rudolph shared his wish for the third prince, a kind and warm-hearted person, to become the next king. He earnestly pleaded with El to settle in his kingdom, emphasizing that his people deserved this happiness. El was surprised and impressed by how serious the king was. He noticed the determination in the king's eyes and understood that Rudolph's request wasn't for personal gain, but for the good of his people. El smiled, feeling glad he had chosen this land and this king, who seemed to care deeply for others. King Rudolph agreed with El's points and promised to do everything he could to support El in building the magic tower. El, however, mentioned that he had certain conditions for helping, including needing 3 years to prepare. Hearing this, Rudolph reacted silently, surprised at the timeline, and said that they didn't have that much time. Rudolph explained to El that Count Louis's land, one of the areas that had suffered terrible damage, would not be able to survive beyond 3 years. Hearing this, El's face changed. He looked surprised, and the smile that had been on his lips disappeared completely. Rudolph continued, telling El that the kingdom had enjoyed peace for many years because of a powerful magician. However, the situation had changed recently. Some unknown people had kidnapped the magician, and ever since, monsters had begun invading Count Louis's territory. These monsters caused a lot of damage, and the number of civilian deaths had been increasing steadily. El's eyes widened when he heard about the magician's kidnapping. He immediately suspected that the Marquis King might be the one behind it. Rudolph went on to tell El that Countess Rin, the daughter of the former count, was currently managing the territory along with Louis. He praised Countess Rin for being a genius not only with the sword but also in handling administrative matters. Despite her great skills, Rudolph admitted that it would be impossible to save the territory if the monsters continued their attacks. He said with a heavy heart that this would lead to the destruction of the Louis family. El told Rudolph that they would have to hold out for 3 years because that was the time he needed to build a magical tower. While cutting into his steak, El reassured the king with a confident smile that he would take care of the monsters in Manticore Gorge. Rudolph, stunned by what he heard, repeated El's words, asking if he really meant Manor Gorge, the land known as the place of death, and whether it was truly possible to fix the problem there. El calmly replied that it was indeed possible, but it would require 3 years of effort. He also asked the king about the number of monster raids that occurred each year. Rudolph informed him that there were about 10,000 raids annually, and there were roughly 15,000 manticores living in the gorge. El folded his arms and thought aloud, realizing that dealing with 15,000 manticores would require time and a well-planned strategy. King Rudolph, still wide-eyed with disbelief, asked if El could really save his kingdom from the monsters of Manor Gorge. El smiled and reminded the king that he was a 7th-level magician. He also revealed that he had a powerful ally, a night golem. This information surprised Rudolph, who admitted that he had almost forgotten how talented El was, partly because of his young age. But now, seeing El's confidence and determination, Rudolph felt hope for the first time. Once more, Rudolph pleaded with El to save the kingdom and bring back peace. El assured him that he was excited to take on the challenge. Standing up, El apologized and prepared to leave. Rudolph asked if he was leaving already, and El replied with a grin that he now knew what had to be done. Before leaving, El revealed that he was only 17 years old. As El walked away, Rudolph smiled, realizing how remarkable El was for someone so young and determined. He wondered if this extraordinary young man could truly save the people from the monsters in Manticore Gorge. The Manticore Gorge was a deep and narrow canyon between 2 towering mountains. Through the gorge ran a small, clear blue river, winding its way through a dense forest. This mysterious gorge was home to about 15,000 manticores. Manticores were massive, fearsome creatures that looked like lions but had wings on their backs and long, deadly scorpion tails. These predators usually had no enemies strong enough to challenge them, but even among them there was a clear sense of respect and hierarchy. Smaller manticores often tucked their tails in submission when they came across a much larger one. These enormous manticores were not only stronger, but had massive, sharp teeth and unmatched strength. They were called Manticore Kings, and each could be recognized by a bright red jewel embedded in its forehead. This jewel was a symbol of their dominance and power over other manticores. A single Manticore King was so powerful that it could overpower 100 regular manticores, or even 100 elite fighters. When manticores attacked, they often left complete destruction in their wake. Entire villages could disappear overnight, as if they had never existed. At this moment, such a fate was looming over the small village of Ken. This tiny settlement sat quietly on the right side of the canyon, nestled in the forest and divided by the Blue River. Ken was surrounded by a simple wooden wall for protection. At its entrance and exit stood 2 watchtowers that were meant to guard against potential threats. The only way in or out of the village was a narrow wooden bridge over the river. Now, this very bridge was under attack by 2 manticores, and the villagers were doing everything they could to defend themselves. Inside the village, one of the desperate soldiers turned to his comrade and asked, "How can we possibly fight 2 manticores at once? It takes all of us just to defeat one." Fear and despair were visible on the faces of the villagers and the soldiers alike. Despite this, one brave soldier shouted that no matter what, they could not allow the manticores to enter the village. He stomped his foot on the ground with force, creating a shockwave that rippled around him. Then, he encouraged anyone willing and able to fight to stand alongside him. His words reignited hope among the villagers, and they turned their eyes to the man who had spoken so boldly. It was Captain Mater, their leader. Captain Mater was already a highly skilled swordsman despite his youth, and his confidence inspired his troops. They had always admired his strength and calm demeanor, and now, even in the face of danger, they felt a glimmer of hope because of him. On the narrow bridge, Captain Mater stood fearlessly against one of the manticores. The creature's dark, menacing aura seemed to fill the air, but Mater's own aura, a gentle green light, swirled around him like a protective shield. The manticore roared loudly, baring its razor-sharp teeth in an attempt to intimidate him. But Captain Mater didn't flinch. He leapt into the air and brought his weapon down with all his forehead. The force of his attack stunned the beast. Seizing the opportunity, he shouted for his soldiers to attack before the creature could recover. The soldiers, armed with bows, immediately released a hail of arrows that struck the manticore all over its body. The beast collapsed, motionless. Even so, Mater delivered a final blow to its head to ensure it was truly defeated. Then, he turned to the second manticore. Using his lance, he attacked its head with precision and force. The manticore let out a piercing scream before falling lifeless to the ground. Mater felt a moment of relief, believing they had overcome the first wave of the attack. However, just as he began to relax, another manticore emerged from the shadows. This one was larger than the others, with 2 sharp horns and a wide-open mouth from which it roared fiercely. It charged toward Mater with terrifying speed. Realizing the danger, Mater quickly shouted to his soldiers, warning them that another manticore was coming. But as he looked around, he saw that his men were exhausted and struggling to stand. This was unlike anything they had faced before. Mater gripped his weapon tightly, knowing they couldn't back down. Despite the odds, he stood firm, his determination unshaken. As the giant manticore rushed at him with fire blazing from its mouth, Captain Mater prepared himself for the ultimate battle. Both he and the manticore readied themselves for what would be a fierce and decisive clash. Captain Mater held his spear tightly as the manticore, its mouth ablaze with fire, made the first move. It hurled a fireball at him, and Mater quickly charged forward. When their attacks met, a thunderous explosion shook the air. The villagers shielded themselves from the strong shockwave while watching the battle with bated breath. As the flames and smoke began to clear, Captain Mater's silhouette appeared. He was kneeling, leaning on his spear, completely exhausted. His eyes fell on the manticore, and he wondered how the creature had survived such a powerful clash. He gazed into the beast's fiery red eyes, still bracing himself for the next attack. The manticore lunged again, and Mater, though drained, stood his ground. Just as he feared this might be the end, a single blow split the manticore into 4, bringing it down in front of him. Both Mater and the villagers were stunned, unable to comprehend how such a fearsome beast had been defeated. As disbelief hung in the air, their eyes turned to the lifeless body of the manticore. Emerging from the water in a red robe and gloves was Kana. She had defeated the beast and confidently reported to El that her mission was complete. Kana stood tall in front of Mater and the villagers, who stared at her in awe. They were astonished that their savior was a young girl who didn't appear to be older than 20. At first glance, it was clear that she was incredibly skilled with the sword. El, who had followed her, praised Kana for her success and remarked that they would need a new master soon. Embarrassed by the compliments, Kana's cheeks turned red. She shyly responded that the task wasn't difficult for her, but she still thanked El for his kind words. After collecting her thoughts, Kana listened as El addressed Mater and the villagers. They remained shocked, struggling to process what had just happened. El introduced himself as a magician who wished to improve their lives and eventually rule the land. With a friendly smile, he tried to deliver this news gently. But Captain Mater was alarmed by El's words. Tightening his grip on his spear, he demanded to know what El meant. Trembling, he pointed his weapon at El, asking why the land should belong to him. Kana, furious at this act, grabbed Mater's weapon and channeled a fiery red aura around her. She angrily asked how he dared to threaten her brother and scolded him for being so disrespectful. Her overwhelming energy left Mater stunned. Though she seemed young, her strength and determination were undeniable. Suddenly, El called out, "Kana, stop!" and placed a calming hand on her shoulder. He gently reminded her that they were strangers here, and it was natural for the villagers to react with fear. Calming down, Kana turned to Mater and gave him a stern warning to behave respectfully in the future. With that, the tense moment passed, and the villagers remained in awe of the young girl's power. El turned to the villagers and admitted he might not have explained his plans clearly. He told them he intended to build a magical tower here after getting rid of all the magicors in the area. The villagers standing on the bridge whispered to each other, shocked by what they were hearing. They realized El's goal was to build a magical tower, and he must be a powerful 7th-level magician who could protect them. Some wanted to believe him, while others doubted his intentions. Captain Mater stepped forward and asked El directly what his plans meant for them. El quickly figured out that this person was the leader of the village. He told Captain Mater that the villagers should continue living just as they had been. Captain Mater was stunned by this answer, his eyes widening as he tried to process El's words. El then explained to Captain Mater and the villages that he would remove all the manticores in the area. This would allow the village to grow and use more land without fear of attacks. He also made it clear that he didn't want to be a cruel ruler and wouldn't raise taxes, but planned to leave most things as they were. El said his wishes were the same as the king's, to see everyone live happily. And Captain Mater couldn't believe what he was hearing. His eyes widened and his mouth fell open as he tried to understand El's words. The villagers on the bridge were also stunned and struggled to make sense of it. Just then, a loud paw hit the ground, and another manticore appeared behind El. El quickly noticed it and turned around. He created a magical circle beneath him and told the villagers to stay calm. A portal opened to another dimension, and 3 large iron golems stepped through, standing impressively behind him. El became serious and ordered the golems to deal with the manticore. One golem's helmet opened slightly, showing the command had been understood. It moved toward the manticore, which looked small in comparison. It crushed it with a single blow. Captain Mater, already shocked by everything, was left speechless. The iron golem followed El's instructions and knelt before him, waiting for more commands. El turned to Captain Mater and asked if he trusted him now. The captain's expression shifted. As the village leader, he knew he couldn't act too quickly and needed to trust his instincts. Seeing how powerful El was, and realizing the village would be safe with the golems around, he decided to believe in him. Captain Mater placed a hand on his chest and apologized. El extended his hand, saying the captain's cautious behavior showed he was a good leader and there was no shame in being wary of strangers. Captain Mater thanked him and shook his hand. However, Captain Mater quickly became serious again. He said they needed to hurry to the other side of the village to defend against more manticores. El smiled and assured him there was no need to worry. He explained that while he and Kana handled this side, his mother, his sister Serena, and their golden golem Tana were taking care of the manticores on the other side. El's mother and Serena were repeatedly amazed by Tana's incredible strength, their eyes widening as they watched the golem defeat the manticores with ease. At the end of the battle, Tana stood in the sunlight, enjoying its warmth. El asked Captain Mater to gather the village leaders because he wanted to share his plans with them. After several hours, El, his group, and the villagers met in a building at the center of the village, sitting around a table. As El observed the group, he was surprised. He had expected older leaders, but most representatives were young men with strong, muscular builds. Looking closer, he noticed they all had a similar energy, or aura. Curious, El wondered if there was a specific reason for this. After taking in the scene, El stood up and greeted everyone warmly. He introduced himself and quickly began sharing his thoughts. He asked if the villagers had trained in the same sword technique, pointing out their similar aura and impressive strength, which seemed unusual for ordinary villagers. The villagers and Captain Mater looked surprised by El's words. El also questioned why such skilled individuals were living in a remote place like this. Captain Mater paused, looked down, then met El's gaze. He admitted that El's sharp observations didn't surprise him. He praised El's keen eye and revealed that these men were actually knights of Baron Jamier. This baron was famous for his sword skills and had earned the title of swordmaster by the age of 30. Captain Mater, looking troubled, continued his story. With his head lowered, he explained that during the battle for the crown, many groups tried to recruit the baron to their side. El's mother watched Mater with care, noticing how painful it was for him to talk about these events. Mater explained that despite many attempts to persuade him, the baron refused all offers. Trouble began when monsters invaded the region and no one came to help the baron. Rudolph and his mother listened closely, especially as Mater spoke about the baron's struggles. Mater revealed that the baron led 5,000 soldiers into battle, but they were overwhelmed, and the baron's entire family was killed. With tears in his eyes, Mater recounted how, as probationary knights, the baron had ordered them to flee and survive. Other villagers, also tearful, added to the story, explaining that after escaping they refused to seek shelter with the nobles who had abandoned their beloved leader. Instead, they settled in this village. El's mother listened sadly, feeling the weight of the soldiers' tragic story. El, while attentive, wasn't as emotional as his mother. He understood how the soldiers must have felt, but couldn't grasp why they hadn't moved to another land. With their skills, they could have become knights elsewhere and avoided such danger. Still, as El thought about this, he realized he might not fully understand their choices. He recognized that everyone had their own beliefs and circumstances that shaped their actions. Looking at his hands, El resolved to focus on helping these people first before judging their decisions. He turned back to the village representatives and explained that dealing with the manticores wasn't the real challenge for him. He then looked at his sisters before addressing Captain Mater again, laying out his plans. El told the villagers his first goal was to confront the leaders of the manticores, which shocked the villagers, who found the idea hard to believe. El added that once his plans were set, he would need the villagers' help. Captain Mater, stunned by the bold plan, asked if defeating the Manticore King was truly possible. El confidently told the villagers that he would keep his promise and show them how to defeat the beast. The creature was twice the size of a normal one, with a red jewel on its forehead, wings, and a scorpion tail. After sorting things out with the villagers, El moved on to his next task. He happily went to a place he hadn't been to in a long time. Standing on a cliff, he looked down at the city where his journey began. The rising sun cast a golden glow over the city. El stood where he once gazed at the view with his mother. This was the kingdom of Bansar in Kashia, where the Dibel store was located. The city looked just as it had when El left. Inside the store, Dibel was busy at his desk, signing important documents brought by his secretary. He signed each paper and handed it back to her for further processing. Ever since he gained the right to sell magical stones, his small store had become famous, and he thought of El as a key customer and partner. Dibel also remembered watching El grow up, and was proud of how far he had come. Lost in his thoughts, Dibel hoped El was doing well. Recently, he had read in the news about an attack on Marquis Einhardt's estate, and it made him wonder if El was involved. Dibel was surprised as he read the article because, before leaving, El had asked him questions about Marquis Einhardt. Concerned, Dibel wished for El's safety and tried to piece together what had happened. No matter how hard he tried, Dibel couldn't find information about the explosion, leaving him more worried. Folding his hands, he hoped El was somewhere safe. His thoughts were interrupted when his secretary called his name multiple times. When Dibel finally snapped out of it, he asked how long she had been standing there. She told him she had been calling him for a while, and then said one of his important customers was waiting outside. Shocked, Dibel asked if he had heard her correctly. She confirmed it and led the customer inside. It was El, smiling and excited as he said it had been a while since they last met. Dibel was astonished to see him. El got straight to the point, saying he had matters to discuss. But Dibel didn't address this right away. Instead, he rushed to El, shaking him and asking if he was okay and if he was hurt. He also asked about El's mother and siblings, making sure they were safe. Dibel said he had heard about the trouble of Marquis Einhardt's estate and couldn't stop worrying. He admitted that he feared El might have been involved in the explosion. Still holding El, Dibel was relieved when El reassured him that everyone was fine. El thanked him for his concern, adding that it felt good to have someone care about him. Dibel let go of him, adjusted his glasses, and apologized for overreacting. He explained that he'd known El since he was 7 years old and that El meant a lot to him. Dibel gestured to a chair and invited El to sit. He then took a seat opposite El and asked what he wanted to discuss. El began honestly, saying he planned to build a magical tower. This shocked Dibel, who repeated El's words in disbelief. As El explained his plans, Dibel realized the news about the explosion might indeed be connected to him. El confirmed it, and revealed something even more surprising. He was now a 7th level mage. Dibel was stunned. With wide eyes, he told El that from the moment he met him as a child, he had sensed he was special. Still, he never imagined that by his 20s, El would already achieve such greatness as a 7th level mage. El was asked by Dibel where he wanted to build his magical tower. El replied confidently that he planned to construct it in the Manticore Gorge. Dibel repeated El's words in disbelief, wanting to make sure he had heard correctly. He asked if El really intended to build the tower in one of the 3 forbidden areas of the continent, specifically in a region full of dangerous monsters. El simply smiled and confirmed his plans, leaving Dibel amazed. At that moment, Dibel accepted that his earlier assessment of El was accurate. El was an unpredictable person whose actions were impossible to anticipate. In most places, a person wanting to build a magical tower would be welcomed and could choose any ideal location. That's why El's decision to build a tower in the monster-filled Manticore Gorge seemed baffling to Dibel. However, Dibel trusted that El had a bigger plan, even if it wasn't clear yet. So he told El that he agreed and thought the idea was a good one. This surprised El, who hadn't even explained all the details yet. El wondered why Dibel was so quick to support him. Dibel, sitting across from him, responded with excitement, saying that everything El did was always fresh and intriguing. He was eager to see what El's next steps would be. El smiled at Dibel's trust and started to share his future plans. As Dibel suspected, El's ideas were indeed thrilling, and Dibel was confident that, if successful, the project would be one of the greatest on the continent. Just as Dibel can't wait for El's next move, we hope you feel the same about our content. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to join us on this incredible journey. Dibel mentioned he would start recruiting workers to help construct the magical tower and asked when they should be ready. El replied that the sooner the better. However, with a hint of concern, he asked if it would be difficult to find such people. Dibel admitted honestly that it might be a challenge to find workers willing to build in a place like the Manticore Gorge, where the Manticore King resided. El, however, dismissed the concern with confidence, stating that this wouldn't be an issue. In the Manticore Gorge, there was a serene spot by a crystal-clear river, fed by a waterfall, surrounded by green trees and a gentle breeze. This peaceful place was rarely visited because it was the territory of the Manticore King. The massive creature resting by the river was napping alongside a few of his subjects. But suddenly, A strange and powerful energy disturbed the king's rest. He woke up, yawned, revealing sharp teeth, and stretched before letting out a fearsome roar that echoed across the gorge. It was a clear warning to all creatures around him. Standing up, the Manticore King reached a towering height of 6 meters, surrounded by a dark and intimidating aura. His glowing red eyes, along with the jewel on his forehead, mocked his power, which was greater than that of a swordmaster. Fully awake now, he raced toward the source of the energy, his expression fierce and determined. Unlike other Manticore Kings who relied on their followers, this one believed in his own unmatched strength. He was eager to confront whatever caused this strange disturbance, confident that nothing could defeat him. The king sprinted at full speed, leaping over obstacles, ready to face the unknown force. When he arrived, he saw 3 magical iron golems under L's control. One golem stood in front, while the other 2 positioned themselves just behind. In response to the Manticore King's approach, L appeared on the shoulder of one of the golems and announced that the king had fallen into his trap. The Manticore King roared again, louder this time, displaying his anger and power. L had anticipated the king's monstrous nature. After all, it took a true monster to lead such a dangerous group of creatures. Yet L was also intrigued by the dark aura surrounding the king. It was so intense that L had to shield himself against it, recognizing the potential danger. Despite the risk, L's adventurous side urged him to uncover the source of this mysterious energy. L stood tall and faced the king, determined to learn more about the dark power. However, the Manticore King, unwilling to engage in peaceful observation, growled and prepared to fight. One of L's iron golems stepped forward, swinging its massive hand in an attempt to strike the king. Before the attack could land, the Manticore King used his scorpion-like tail to block it. The tail's power was so immense that it seriously damaged the golem's armor, rendering it useless. L was astonished by the king's quick reflexes and strength. Realizing the threat, L commanded the remaining 2 golems to attack together. One of them managed to land a punch on the Manticore King's face. However, the king's iron-like skin made the attack ineffective, and he effortlessly countered. It became clear to L that the battle would not be easy. The Manticore King was not just a formidable opponent, but a creature of immense strength, determined to defend his territory. Al prepared for the next move, knowing the fight would test both his strategy and his resolve. L quickly realized that his attacks were too weak to break through the Manticore's tough, iron-like skin. Knowing how strong it was, the Manticore didn't give L or his golems any time to recover. It bit into the iron golem's armor, and even tore one of the golem's arms off, completely defeating it. The golem collapsed to the ground, showing just how formidable L's enemy was. This Manticore wasn't just strong, it was a true king, one that had defended its land countless times and proven its dominance. Although 2 out of L's 3 golems had already been taken down, the third one kept attacking, trying to catch the Manticore off guard from behind. But the Manticore was too sharp and quickly spotted the sneak attack. Using its powerful hind legs, it countered the attack and struck the last golem hard, smashing its face and leaving it shattered on the battlefield. From above, the Manticore stood tall and undefeated, surrounded by the remains of the iron golems, a symbol of its rule over the land. To show its strength, the Manticore roared loudly, sending out a wild shockwave that echoed through the area. L couldn't deny that this creature was far stronger than he had expected. Looking at his golems, he saw they weren't regenerating fast enough, which told him the Manticore's attacks were incredibly powerful. Understanding the danger he was in, L decided to summon Tana, his golden golem, to join the battle. But before he could complete the summoning, the Manticore took advantage of his hesitation and attacked with its sharp claws. L was caught off guard and struck hard by the beast, sending him flying across the forest until he crashed to the ground. The Manticore didn't waste any time and moved toward L, ready to finish the fight. But it paused and looked upward, sensing L's presence high above. L took a moment to steady himself, relieved that what the Manticore had struck was just his phantom. Watching from above, he realized how dangerous this fight was. Without his phantom to observe from a safe distance, the battle could have been lost already. L had hoped to defeat the beast using only his regular golems, but now he knew he had to get serious. Since his phantom couldn't summon Tana earlier, L himself activated the summoning. A glowing magic circle appeared beneath him, and a portal opened on the rocky ground. From the portal, Tana leapt into the battlefield, ready to take on the Manticore King. L commanded her to fight without her sword and to execute Plan B. Following his orders, Tana prepared for the fight. Tana charged at the Manticore, aiming to strike it like the first golem had. But this time, the Manticore dodged skillfully, avoiding her attacks. After dodging, the beast lunged at Tana with its front claws, but she managed to avoid getting hit and counterattacked. Unfortunately, her strike missed as the Manticore dodged again. This left Tana in a tricky spot, her back turned to the Manticore. Sensing the opportunity, the Manticore prepared to attack, but Tana quickly turned to face it. Instead of relying on brute strength this time, the Manticore unleashed a new type of attack. Opening its mouth, it fired a dark energy beam straight at Tana. She raised her hands to shield herself, but the attack was overwhelming. L was surprised to see even Tana struggling against the Manticore. However, he knew she wasn't fighting at full strength yet. Signaling her to stop holding back, he ordered her to get serious. Tana's eyes glowed, and she prepared to unleash her true power. After the Manticore's energy attack faded, Tana raised her arm and gathered a fiery aura in her fist. The Manticore, unwilling to give her time, charged forward. But Tana had already built up enough energy and struck with a massive blow, sending the Manticore flying through the air. It crashed to the ground, stunned by her strength, while Tana stood unscathed, ready to finish the fight. She jumped onto the Manticore, pinning it down, and prepared to end the battle. But El stopped her. saying it was enough. Both Tana and the Manticore looked at El in surprise. He explained there was no need to kill the beast. Even the Manticore, stunned by this mercy, sat down calmly, looking like a tamed kitten. El joked, "I wish my cats were this sweet," amused by the sudden change in the ferocious beast. This unexpected outcome left El surprised too. Afterward, El returned to the village of Ken, where the townspeople were still amazed by his earlier victory against 2 other Manticore captains. Captain Mater, watching the enormous Manticore King, was stunned. The towering 6-meter beast now behaved like a loyal pet, snuggling up to El for attention. Mater couldn't believe what he was seeing. He worried about the destruction the creature could cause if it went on a rampage. But El reassured him everything was under control. He even joked, inviting Mater to pet the beast like an oversized cat. The Manticore seemed eager for affection, even licking Mater's face to show it meant no harm. Still unsure, Mater hesitated, but the Manticore's peaceful behavior eased his fears. As the beast rested calmly, Mater asked El what he planned to do with such a powerful creature. El simply smiled, knowing the Manticore was now part of his team. El explained to Mater once more that the Manticore King was as strong as a semi-Grandmaster Knight and could command other, smaller Manticores. El's plan was to use the Manticore King as his pet to make life easier and take control of the other Manticores. As the big cat drooled and its saliva dripped onto Captain Mater, he realized what El intended and admitted it was a smart idea. Elf then told Mater that he would soon begin building a magical tower to protect the land and allow the villagers to live peacefully. Knowing his plans could finally move forward, El felt as happy as his new pet, smiling widely. 3 months later, the Manticore King was gone from the Manticore Gorge. The construction of the magical tower had started and was going well. Inside the tower, a portal was built to directly connect Deeble's shop to the tower. Thanks to the workers Deeble hired, expensive materials were delivered quickly and construction progressed efficiently. El's mother and sisters helped by preparing supplies for the builders. Before long, the outside of the magical tower began to take shape. The tower, made of gold, was huge and elegant, standing tall with several floors reaching toward the sky. Sometimes, people came near the tower, looking at it in disbelief, unsure what such a massive building could be. Many thought it might just be a large warehouse. But while the tower was being built, El started working on another important part of his plan, catching and relocating smaller manticores. Many of these animals had disappeared into the nearby forests after their king vanished. Using magic, El captured the remaining smaller manticores and sent them to another dimension. This wasn't easy and brought big changes to the land, which amazed people and made El proud of his success. Over time, fewer manticores were seen near the tower, and attacks from the wildcats stopped almost completely. This made it possible to build more houses near the tower. Soon, a peaceful city with 0 people grew around it. El's mother and sisters noticed how calm and safe life had become, which had seemed impossible before. They sat together at a table, talking about how they wouldn't have believed this transformation if they hadn't seen it with their own eyes. While Serna and El's mother spoke about the city's progress, Kana reminded them that their plans were not finished. El agreed with his red-haired sister, saying they still had a lot to do. Serna, holding a cup of coffee, asked what the next step would be. El, sipping his own coffee and waiting for it to cool, explained that their upcoming plans would be costly, so raising money was their top priority, to keep building the magical tower. He also mentioned that he had to meet someone important. This surprised Serna and Kana, who wondered who this person could be. Serna, almost teasing, thought El might be meeting someone special, like a rival or a love interest. She noted she had never seen her brother act this way and wondered who could be so important. El's mother, sitting at the table with her coffee, smiled quietly, happy to see her family, enjoying a moment of peace after all the challenges. Small waves from the sea lapped at a golden sandy beach nearby. The water was clear, with only a few small stones scattered along the shore. El walked along the beach with his family, telling them he wanted to introduce them to someone important. Serna eagerly said she couldn't wait to meet the person, while their mother smiled knowingly. She seemed to understand the emotions her children were feeling. Serna and Kana turned to their mother, asking why she was laughing. She apologized and said it was nothing, letting the moment pass. Together, they walked along the beach, wondering who this important person might be. However, all they could see were bits of seaweed and barrels of seafood. The beach seemed empty. El stopped and asked his family if they didn't think this place was amazing. He said he found this beach very special, explaining it was on the western side of the Toland Kingdom, known for its seafood. However, he mentioned that the lack of magicians in the area made it poor because they couldn't sell their seafood properly. As El spoke, he suddenly remembered he hadn't told his family who owned this land. Before he could explain, the ground shook and a loud rumble echoed around them. The family looked toward the source of the noise. Over the trees, they saw a thick black cloud rising from the forest. They realized it was the cause of the tremor. In the forest, a large wall stood, and archers on top of it were trying to stop orcs from breaking through. The guards pulled back their bows and aimed at the large green pigs attacking them. Before the orcs could climb over the wall, the guards shot arrows to stop them. But the arrows bounced off the tough orcs, who then pulled out their weapons and attacked. One orc managed to jump onto the wall and started climbing up. It was just a few inches away from reaching the top. The guard commander saw this and told his soldiers to pour oil over the wall to make the orc lose its grip and fall. Unfortunately, the soldiers told him they had already run out of oil. As the commander thought about what to do next, the large pig got closer to its target. Suddenly, a voice said they would handle it, surprising the commander. He looked to his right and saw someone in a yellowish cloak, looking like a last-minute hero. It was Roellen, the person in charge of this land. Roellen had light pink hair, red eyes, and wore a blue shirt, riding pants, and boots. She had a sword hanging from her left side. She confidently told the soldiers to cover her as she climbed onto the wall. The soldiers distracted the orc below by yelling at it, and then Rowelin jumped off the wall straight toward it. While in midair, she drew her sword and defeated the orc in one quick strike. She muttered that orcs never knew when to quit, and that this stubbornness was something they had in common. As she fell further down, she spotted her next target and asked the other orc if it was upset about losing its friend. Before she hit the ground, her sword started glowing with a strong light. With one powerful swing, she defeated the second orc as well. She took a moment to catch her breath and told the fallen orcs she didn't enjoy beating them but had no choice. The soldiers cheered for Rowelin's victory. But then, she noticed something behind her. Turning around, she saw another orc climbing the wall and about to attack a soldier with its club. The soldier froze in fear, unable to move as the orc got ready to strike. Just as the orc swung its club, a fireball flew in from behind and set the orc on fire before it could harm the soldier. Rowlin looked around and realized the fireball came from magic. She wondered who had cast it. Then, a man appeared and apologized for surprising her. He was holding magic flames in his hand. He smiled and said he had finally found the person he had been searching for. Meanwhile, in a dense forest nearby, Rin's siblings and their mother were running. Sirna, Rin's sister, led the way, wondering where her brother had gone. Her sister Kana and their mother followed, amazed at how Rin could move so quickly through such thick woods. After some time, they finally got out of the forest and reached a clearing. Sirna was thrilled to be out of the trees and quickly looked around for her brother. Elle's mother asked if anyone had seen her son. When their eyes landed on him, they looked both surprised and worried. Elle was standing with Rowelin and talking to her. Kerna and Kana whispered to each other, wondering if this beautiful woman was the important person their brother had mentioned. They even suspected he might have feelings for her. Rowelin pointed her sword at Elle and demanded to know why he wanted to talk to her, reminding him that they had just met. She warned him not to try anything foolish. Elle stayed calm and admitted he might have been too eager. He explained that he was excited to finally meet her. Smiling, he introduced himself as a mage from the Tolan Kingdom and said he had come to discuss an important matter with her. Rowlin didn't trust him at first and asked why she should believe him. She looked at him with suspicion. To prove himself, Elle used his magic, creating a swirling stream of energy. The powerful aura surprised Rowelin, and she realized his magic was on a completely different level. She understood he was not an ordinary mage, and was likely telling the truth. She put away her sword and placed a hand on her chest, apologizing for being rude. She explained that she was only trying to protect her land, and asked for his forgiveness. Rowlin then invited Elle, Serna, Kana, and their mother to continue their conversation at Count Luvia's residence. The residence was perched on a cliff with a stunning view of the blue sea. When they arrived, Rowlin served tea and apologized for it not being fancy. The guests didn't mind as the tea was delicious. Elle's mother even complimented the aroma, saying she was surprised by how good it was. Rowlin apologized once more for not being able to provide her guests with better hospitality. Unlike his mother, Elle was more doubtful about the situation. He appreciated the tea, but knew it wasn't anything special since it could easily be bought. The castle didn't seem to have any luxuries, and even Rin's clothing was plain and simple. Elle began to understand that this territory's financial state was worse than he had imagined. Rowlin then asked her guests why they had come to see her that day. Elle explained that this territory, ruled by Count Louis, had not only been attacked by orcs, as previously mentioned, but also by manticores. However, he assured her there was no need to worry about it anymore. Rowlin was surprised and asked if Elle was offering to help her. Elle responded that they didn't need any assistance anymore. This confused Rin, who questioned why they didn't need help against such dangerous creatures. Elle explained that he'd already dealt with most of the manticores himself. Moreover, he had built a magical tower in the former Manticore Gorge, which now prevented any further attacks in the territory. Rin was stunned by this revelation. She sat in silence, visibly amazed and unable to speak. Elle tried several times to address Rowlin, but she remained in shock. Elle's mother recognized that Rowlin was overwhelmed. A few moments later, Rowlin snapped out of her daze and apologized for the delay. Although she was still skeptical, she admitted that she had noticed fewer manticores around recently, which made her start believing Elle's story. Elle reassured her that soon all the remaining manticores would disappear. Rin's eyes welled up with tears as she thanked Elle, saying this was the best news she had heard in years. She struggled to find the right words to express her gratitude. Elle was taken aback by the gratitude, especially since he hadn't yet shared the main reason for his visit. He paused to gather his thoughts and felt relieved that he could help, eager to see Rowlin's reaction when he revealed his plans to support her family in the kingdom. Before Elle could speak further, his mother chimed in. She explained that Elle's father had been part of the Luia's family, and that their visit was partly because Elle felt a strong connection to this lineage. She revealed that Elle's father was Ryan Luias, making him and Ryle likely cousins. This news left Rin astonished. Rowlin confirmed that Rowlin was indeed part of her family. She explained that Rowlin had protected the territory from monsters until he was abducted and declared missing. Once again, Rowlin was shocked, needing a moment to process the fact that Rowlin had a son. Elle expressed relief that Rowlin was taking the news well and emphasized that families should support one another in tough times. As he spoke, his mother, Serna and Kana, listened closely to his heartfelt words. Meanwhile, the gentle sound of waves crashing against the rocks echoed through the castle. Elle assured Rowlin that with her help, she could continue protecting her people from future dangers. Tears streamed down Rin's cheeks again, and she apologized for showing such emotion. Elle's mother kindly reassured her, saying it was perfectly fine and even admirable. However, Rowlin dismissed the formality and insisted that everyone address her by her first name instead of her title, Countess, which people often used out of politeness. Elle's mother warmly accepted this and introduced herself as Silfur. Terna, Kana, and El reintroduced themselves, all smiling, happy to see that Rowelin seemed like a kind and approachable family member. As a gesture of gratitude, Rowelin asked if she could take the family to a famous spot in the Luas territory. She enthusiastically asked if they liked the sea. The three women excitedly agreed, looking forward to the trip. Rowelin smiled and suggested they take advantage of the beautiful weather for a little outing. The water was crystal clear and gentle waves rolled onto the shore. As Silfer, Serna, and Kana strolled along the beach, they admired the sea's beauty. The women laughed and splashed in the cool water, enjoying the moment. Rowelin explained to El that the sea was one of the few things in the territory they could truly take pride in. El gazed at a nearby barrel and asked if the sea was always so clear and abundant with seafood in this area. Rowelin seemed slightly surprised by his question, but confirmed that the sea was indeed rich in resources. She pointed to a barrel overflowing with seaweed and explained that they had so much seafood they couldn't consume it all. Some were stored in barrels, but they hadn't yet figured out a good way to export the excess. El thoughtfully asked Rowelin what she thought about selling him all the surplus seafood. Rowelin was a bit surprised by what El planned to do with all the seafood. She asked if he was serious and what he would do with it. El explained that since she had extra seafood, it would be useful for him. He also mentioned that she wouldn't need to worry about delivery or logistics because he could transport everything in a magical box, which made it easy. Smiling, he asked her to accept his offer. Rowelin noticed that her cousin had some sort of plan behind his smile and asked if she was right. Still, she agreed to El's request and promised to give him any extra seafood in the future. El was thrilled that she had accepted his request. In this world, people mainly use potions to increase their energy and help their bodies heal faster. For example, one key ingredient in a healing potion is manticore blood. To use it, temples have a special method to purify the blood and make it safe for potion making. However, there is not enough potion supply in the kingdoms to help everyone who is injured. The main problem is that manticore blood is hard to get. This has led to auctions being held in the markets to sell the ingredient to the highest bidder. One day, the temple was shocked when Deeble told a temple knight in the Deek Kingdom's reared church that he had access to 300,000 bottles of manticore blood, which was in high demand. When the priest heard this, he was skeptical and asked for confirmation. Deeble assured the priest, named Virik, that he knew someone who had such a large amount. Then, Deeble asked Virik how much blood the church could take. After thinking about it, Virik said his church could only handle between 10,000 and 30,000 bottles. Deeble sighed, disappointed because he had expected them to need closer to 100,000 bottles. This response surprised Virik, who quickly realized that if nearby churches joined forces, they could use 100,000 bottles. He also saw this as an opportunity to gain influence and make huge profits by working with Deeble. Motivated by greed, Virik changed his mind and told Deeble he would take 100,000 bottles. Deeble acted surprised and asked if it was really okay to take such a big order. To seal the deal, Deeble said the blood was highly sought after by other churches and set the price at 300,000 gold coins with no discount. Without much negotiation, Virik agreed to the high price and thanked Deeble for the opportunity. However, Virik's curiosity got the better of him, and he asked who could provide such a rare material in such a large amount. Smiling, Deeble said the supplier was, in simple terms, a genius of their time. He was talking about El. At that moment, El stood at the top of his magical tower, looking at the city that had grown around it. He couldn't believe this area had once been the dangerous Manticore Gorge. Nearby, a warehouse held crates of manticore blood that workers were transporting, helping to keep the city's economy strong. El remembered how he had captured the manticores and moved them to his magical space using his powers. He fed them the seafood he got from his cousin. After eating, the manticores let the villagers collect their blood. At first, some smaller manticores resisted, but El calmed them down with the help of a new pet from the Manticore Kingdom. Over time, the manticores and villagers formed a mutual relationship. This system created a continuous cycle where manticores could regenerate their blood quickly, allowing the village to make a steady profit. A true bond developed between the creatures and the villagers. While standing atop his tower, El thought about how few people knew about the magical tower in Manticore Gorge. This was because goods were transported through a teleportation portal, and the nearby roads showed no signs of heavy traffic. Still, there were rumors about a magical tower that could rival others in the kingdom. El knew he had to remain careful to protect the peace he had built. As he stood deep in thought, someone rushed into his room. Quickly, El used a small portal to teleport back inside. Just as he arrived, Kana burst through the door, calling his name loudly. She looked upset and alarmed. El immediately asked her why she was in such a hurry and what was wrong. Tears streaming down her face, Kana cried that something was wrong with her sister. A cold feeling ran through El's body, and he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He ran with Kana down the corridor, opened the door to Serna's room, and called her name. When El entered the room, he saw Serna lying in bed, while their mother sat beside her, looking after her. Serna had a high fever, was sweating heavily, and struggling to breathe. El quickly asked their mother what was wrong with her. She admitted she didn't know, and begged El to use his magic to figure out what was happening. Taking his mother's words seriously, and noticing Serna's difficult breathing, El touched her wrist and used his magic to investigate. He was shocked when he realized that the energy, or mana, inside her was slowly fading away. At the same time, something new was forming inside her. At first, he couldn't tell if it was a dark energy like a demon's, or a pure energy like heaven's power. After a while, El told his mother and sister Kana that he believed the new energy inside Serna was holy power. He warned them that they had made a mistake, and that now the entire continent might be after Serna. Both his mother and Kana were stunned by this news. El explained that there was no time to waste because others might already know what was happening. He told Kana to stay by Serna's side and take care of her, which she agreed to do immediately. El then told his family he needed to create a magical barrier around the village. His mother asked if it was necessary to do it right away. El confirmed and reassured them not to worry. He also mentioned that he might not return for a while. Then, he vanished through a portal, leaving his family alone in Serna's room. El returned to the magical tower, thinking about how long it might take to put up a barrier around the village. He knew it didn't matter if it took extra time, because it had to be done perfectly. His determination to protect his sister was clear in his eyes. He raised his hand and released his magic. A glowing magic circle appeared beneath him, spinning rapidly as though it was alive. A beam of light shot up into the sky and spread outward, creating a large dome-like barrier around the entire city. At the same time, in the Holy Kingdom of Gaia, a high priest in the Vatican announced that the moment they had been waiting for had finally arrived. This event had been prophesied 300 years ago. Alongside him, younger priests and apprentices knelt, listening carefully. They all looked at a glowing source of mana that provided prophecies about the future. The mana revealed that it was time to be both happy and cautious, because the world was going through great changes. It spoke of a place that had remained a mystery, from which a powerful radiant light would come to drive away darkness. The prophecy also mentioned a rare flower, clearly referring to Serna. The elder priest asked his apprentice, O.S., if he understood the prophecy. The apprentice explained that the place mentioned in the prophecy could be the Levitan Plateau, a location linked to dark magic. He also suggested that the flow mentioned in the prophecy might symbolize magical energy. Sentence by sentence, he shared his thoughts, concluding that the prophecy hinted at the arrival of a new saint. The elder priest praised his apprentice for his interpretation and declared that they must announce the coming of a new saint. The priests were instructed to work with the Talon Kingdom and its knights to fulfill this divine task. The elder priest added that the emergence of the saint was part of God's plan and encouraged everyone to dedicate themselves fully to this mission. Overjoyed by the prophecy, he reminded them that the Holy Kingdom had never been stronger and that they had been waiting for this moment for over 500 years. Back in the village, Serna's condition worsened. Her fever climbed higher, and her breathing grew more labored. Kana wept as she watched her sister suffer, hoping she would recover. Their mother quietly prayed for Serna to get better. As a loving mother, she gently brushed Serna's hair and touched her face, wishing for the day when they could smile and enjoy life together again. El eventually returned to the room and updated his family. He explained that the mana in Serna's body was being replaced by holy power. Unlike ordinary people, Serna had an immense amount of mana in her body. Because of this, the holy power taking its place was also massive, causing her intense pain. El made it clear that this process could not be stopped. There was no way to prevent Serna from becoming a saint. He knew the Holy Kingdom would soon announce the birth of a new saint, and it wouldn't be long before they discovered Serna. Kana understood that this kingdom, which worshipped the gods, would stop at nothing to take her sister away. El's mother also knew that saints had no freedom, and being a saint was no better than living in misery. She couldn't bear to let her daughter face such a terrible life, and vowed to do everything to keep her safe. When Kana sensed her mother's strong feelings, she decided to do all she could to protect her dear sister. El also promised to save his loved ones from this fate, assuring his mother and sister that they would protect Serna together. Join us in their journey, subscribe to our channel, and never miss a moment of this epic story. Suddenly, a soft noise echoed in the room, and it grew louder as it approached El. It turned into a magical letter that floated into his hands. As El read it, he saw it was from the royal palace. His mother, curious, asked why they were contacting him, and if something important had happened. El explained that the letter invited him to the royal conference. Suspicious, his mother asked why he, of all people, was asked to attend. El admitted he had no idea. He guessed they might want him to officially announce his creation of a new magic tower or declare his alliance with the Third Prince to support the Essen faction. But El also knew that magic towers usually stayed neutral, so the invitation might not affect his plans. Worried, his mother asked what he intended to do this time. Smiling a little, El reassured her, then set out, telling his mother and sisters to take care of Serna while he was away. In parting, his mother wished him a safe trip and asked him to come back unharmed. El then headed to his cousin Rowalin's home. Her residence was still modest and lacked fancy furnishings, but it was clear her territory was more stable than before. Rowland thanked El again, saying his help had made the improvements possible. However, she was curious why El had visited. She couldn't believe he was just wandering around without a reason. Oh, El teased her, asking if he was really that predictable. Rowland gave him a knowing look, saying that even though they hadn't known each other long, everyone could see that El always had a plan. Laughing, El admitted she wasn't wrong and asked if she'd attend the royal conference with him. He explained it could help the Lewis family gain recognition in global politics. Surprised, Rowland asked if she'd heard him right. El assured her that with her abilities and the Magic Tower's support, she could restore the Loyas family's noble status. He suggested that exporting seafood could solve their financial problems. El also reminded Rowland that she was still famous as a skilled swordswoman despite her young age, and that her group of knights admired her greatly. If these knights chose to fight for the Luias family, their political influence would grow even more. All these efforts, El said, would help the Luias family regain its honor. Rowland thought about El's words. She doubted her family, even if it kept improving, could ever match the power of other noble families. El guessed she was thinking about the Tandel family and brought them up. Startled, Rowland asked why he mentioned them. Elle explained he'd heard that the second son of the Tandel family had been pressuring her family with constant marriage proposals. On top of that, the Tandels used the recent monster attacks on the Luias family's land as an excuse to increase their pressure. Elle also revealed that the Tandels were secretly responsible for the monsters entering her family's territory. Hearing this, Roline clenched her fists. She already knew the Tandel family was arrogant and shameless, but she also knew they outranked her family and took advantage of that. Feeling ashamed, she stared at her hands. Seeing her despair, Elle encouraged her to rise up and show the true strength of her family. He sensed that Roline was ready to take a stand, stop watching her family lose honor, and start rebuilding their reputation, step by step. To reassure her and keep encouraging her, Elle shared that he was a 7th-level mage and had recently acquired a magic tower. He stressed that his level and social rank were equal to the Tandil family, not just in one kingdom, but across the entire continent. Elle also pointed out that in this kingdom, he might even rise to a higher position and ensure the Luias family would no longer face harm. Rowelin gave Elle a mild look and asked why he was being so nice and kind to her. Then she raised her voice, accusing him of having hidden intentions. Elle denied this and asked her not to make light of the situation. He explained that they were cousins and she should stop thinking of him in a romantic way. Realizing her mistake, Rowelin apologized for her misunderstanding. Elle understood, though, that Rowelin's past hardships had made it difficult for her to trust people or believe in their good intentions. This was one reason Elle felt compassion for her. She had been alone for so long. He was glad he could now offer her some help. Afterward, Elle said goodbye to Rowelin and reminded her about the event starting tomorrow. He told her he would pick her up for the conference using teleportation. Until then, she should take care of any other tasks. Teasing her, Elle joked that she actually believed he was interested in her romantically. Rowelin apologized again while Elle laughed and brushed off the joke. Meanwhile, in the castle, an important meeting was underway. A fist slammed on the table as an older man with a funny beard and thinning hair demanded to know what they planned to do. He explained that the second prince's faction was in trouble, while the effort to weaken the first prince's faction had failed. Worse, the third prince's faction had grown stronger. The man warned the group that if things continued like this, they would lose all their power. Turning to the other elders at the table, he asked if anyone had any ideas to stop this from happening. The men remained silent, looking down at the table. Frustrated, the older man raised his voice again, demanding someone speak up. Finally, one of the men raised his hand and said he had an idea. This man looked tired, with deep dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. He began explaining his plan, and the man with the funny beard introduced him as Marquis Bryland. Marquis Bryland pointed out that the first prince's influence remained stable, while the third prince's power kept growing. However, he added that there was no need to panic. He reminded everyone that they still had a strong military force. Then, he quietly shared his plan. The other men were shocked, finding it hard to believe what they had just heard. The man with the funny beard, though, nodded and said he wasn't surprised by Marquis Bryland's cleverness. He admitted the plan was effective and praised Marquis Bryland for his idea. Marquis Bryland thanked him and promised to work hard to put the plan into action and ensure they succeeded. The man with the funny beard added that they belonged in this situation because Serna's mana had faded and was now being replaced by holy power. 2 months had passed. The strong holy power in Serna's body had likely been detected by the Holy Kingdom, and they probably knew her location. However, Elle had other plans to focus on. Accompanied by his cousin Rowelin, he headed to the capital for the Tolan conference. When they arrived, they were amazed by the sight of the capital. They stood on the street, looking up at the grand castle on the hill while the people went about their day. Elle asked Rowelin if she had ever seen such beautiful streets before. She didn't reply right away, standing there frozen. Concerned, Elle asked if something was wrong. Rowelin admitted she was simply overwhelmed by how grand and beautiful the streets were, and she was startled by his question. Elle was surprised to learn that, even as a countess, Rowelin had never been to the capital. She explained that her responsibilities in her territory had always kept her too busy. Hearing this, Elle was reminded again of the heavy burden his cousin had carried alone for so long. To lift her spirits, he suggested they explore the city, since they were already there. This suggestion delighted Rowelin, who asked excitedly if it was really okay. Elle smiled, grabbed her wrist, and pulled her along to explore the streets of the capital. Together, they wandered through the bustling city until evening began to fall. Clouds gathered in the sky as the sun disappeared behind the horizon, leaving the stars to light up a nearby inn where Elle and Roland planned to rest for the night. Both entered the inn, still amazed by the sights of the grand and beautiful capital. Elle admitted it felt good to relax and enjoy their time, a sentiment Roland wholeheartedly agreed with, expressing their gratitude for such a wonderful experience. Overwhelmed with joy, Rowelin and Roland exchanged a glance, imagining how exciting it would be to bring people from her own land to see this incredible capital. However, their joy was interrupted when someone called Rowelin's name. Her face changed drastically, as though she had been struck by a painful memory. The caller was Locke, and his tone was anything but friendly. He immediately confronted Rowelin, demanding to know who the man she was traveling with was. Without hesitation, he insulted Elle. Locke quickly deduced that Elle wasn't a trained swordsman and mocked him for being a mediocre magician. He even accused Rowelin of rejecting his marriage proposal because of her interest in younger men. His voice echoed throughout the inn's entrance hall as he shouted accusations, leaving no chance for either Rowelin or Elle to defend themselves. Locke stormed up to them and continued hurling insults, his anger growing with every word. Elle stood stunned, unable to grasp what was happening. Locke pointed directly at Elle and demanded that he reveal his identity. Rowelin tried to intervene, telling Locke to stop embarrassing himself and to think before speaking, but her words were ignored. Locke claimed that if El had nothing to hide, he should simply explain who he was. He boasted that even if El was a magician, he would still be far inferior to himself. Rowellen, visibly irritated, asked Locke why he was suddenly looking down on lower-class magicians and pointed out how ridiculous he sounded. As Locke's temper flared, Rowland made it clear the stakes were high in their game. As a countess look in her eyes, she confronted Locke, calling him nothing more than the second son of Marquis Tandalar. She reminded him that as a countess, she outranked him and found his behavior unacceptable. Rowland made it clear that he needed to recognize the vast difference between their social standings. To conclude her sharp remarks, she told Locke to learn the laws of the land before speaking down to someone of higher status. Locke was stunned into silence by her boldness. Shocked and humiliated, he stood still for a moment before apologizing to Rowland. After his apology, he turned to El, still brimming with resentment. Rowland explained to El that Locke was the second son of Marquis Tandal and revealed that he had repeatedly tried to propose to her in the past. El pieced together that Locke's hostility stemmed from jealousy. As they prepared to leave, Locke's expression returned to one of anger. Watching Rowellen and El, his face twisted with hatred and jealousy. Rowellen, fully aware of Locke's growing frustration, loudly declared that they should leave, as his negative energy had ruined the atmosphere. El agreed, and they left Locke behind, still seething with anger. Left alone, Locke clenched his fists and vowed revenge on El, determined to settle the score at the upcoming conference. As the night deepened, clouds slowly drifted across the sky, occasionally revealing a few stars. Meanwhile, on the palace balcony, King Rudolph stood with Duke Lyers, looking out over the city. The king remarked that he was pleased with how well the Manor Gorge issue had been resolved, and asked for the Duke's thoughts. Duke Lyers agreed, giving credit to El, the magician who owned the tower. He also praised the golems, noting their critical role in defeating the monsters from Manticore Gorge. The Duke marveled at how powerful the golems were, comparing their strength to that of Grand Master-ranked knights. He spoke highly of El's brilliance, calling him an extraordinary magician. King Rudolph, amused by the praise, turned to the Duke and jokingly asked if he had just compared El to an onion. Duke Lyers laughed and explained that he had, but only because El reminded him of one, layered and full of surprises. The more you learned about him, the more remarkable and complex he seemed. The king joined in the laughter, calling the comparison unusual but fitting. As they continued talking, the Duke made a lighthearted joke about water, asking if the king meant a well. The king chuckled but brushed it off, instead expressing his gratitude for El's contributions to the kingdom. He said he was eager to see what El would bring to the upcoming conference. The conversation ended as the night deepened, leaving the king and Duke to marvel at the city below. With stars scattered across the dark sky, the palace lights cast a serene glow over the capital. As El and Rowaline prepared for what lay ahead, Lawalin remained behind, plotting his revenge. Despite the calm of the night, tensions were rising, and the days ahead promised to bring even greater challenges for El and his companions. Duke Lyers asked King Redolf if he really believed that El would comply with his request, as it was heard everywhere that a magical tower should not interfere in domestic affairs. King Redolf asked the Duke if he really doubted him, and reminded him that even though El was young, his abilities surpassed those of his age. Additionally, while leaning on the railing, he explained that El knew very well how he would affect his surroundings, and that as a king, he could rely on him. He deduced that when he had supported him and accepted his offer to build the magical tower in his kingdom, it was a decision to support him in his struggle for the throne. The next day, the conference began with many aristocrats already in attendance, including Locke, who had seemingly attempted to propose to Roland repeatedly. Before they all sat at a small table, this conference occurred 4 times a year, and any aristocrat who had earned the title in the traditional way could participate and invite up to 2 direct descendants to initiate the conference on that day. King Radolf greeted the aristocrats. Ran sat not directly at the table but on the edge of the conference with some of the other men. The king said that this conference, without a specific theme as usual, should begin, and he invited the aristocrats at the table to present their ideas for the kingdom's development. It didn't take long before the man with the funny beard spoke up, stating that he had something to propose. He began by saying that now that the monsters that had previously endangered them were dead, the kingdom drew hope from beginners. He also explained that he believed the kingdom was now at the highest peak of power it had ever reached, having defeated the monsters with minimal losses, and last year's harvest was truly excellent. All of this was the reason why this year had been the best in decades. The other aristocrats at the table murmured in agreement. The group's eyes moved around the long table as they weighed different options. As the man with the funny beard continued to elaborate on his point, he said that this was probably the best opportunity to expand their influence a bit. According to him, it was now extremely important to convince the surrounding nations of their strength, so he suggested that their idea should be to raise the kingdom of Hessen. The king, as well as the other aristocrats, were somewhat surprised by this idea from Tahin Baller, the man with the funny beard. However, Tajan Bala continued with his explanation. The kingdom of Hessen had stolen from them for several decades, blaming the mountain bandits. Afterwards, when he revealed that they had recently received information that this kingdom disguised its soldiers as mountain bandits to steal food, the other aristocrats at the edge of the conference room were equally astonished. Tudin Balor explained that there was clear evidence justifying a raid, not only for the sake of revenge, but also to demonstrate their newfound strength to neighboring nations. All the aristocrats turned their attention to Duke Tajin Balor. Since this duke was the leader of the second prince, the aristocrats aligned with the first prince were particularly shocked. However, unlike the AR aristocrats, King Redolf maintained composure. Although he was somewhat shocked by this news, he stated that such an action would need serious consideration, and he wanted to contemplate how other nations would react. In his place, blinded by the desire for revenge, Duke Tajan Baylor reassured the king that there was no need to worry, since no one could withstand an overwhelming power attack. He explained that the aristocrats on his side could provide a total army of 200 men, and if the king gave his approval, he would immediately send them all to the kingdom of Hessen. However, King Rudolf knew what Duke Tajan Baylor intended, and the proposal made at the beginning of the conference was quite tempting. If they were to take over the kingdom of Hessen, the influence of their own kingdom would benefit and increase exponentially. Duke Tajan Baylor also mentioned that if the order were given, he would propose the second prince as the supreme commander. His greed and cunning were still evident, as he explained that while the first prince must protect the kingdom, he thought it would be a good idea for the second prince to prove himself and gain some experience. Objectively, the Kingdom of Hessen was not a crucial nation for the Toan Kingdom, but it held significance. If such a raid were successful and the two kingdoms merged, it would be the first step in expanding and providing access to other kingdoms. Additionally, leading such an assault would bring the second prince one step closer to the throne. When Duke Tajan Baylor finished speaking, another aristocrat with light brown hair interrupted him. He disagreed with his colleague and argued that they had few losses last year thanks to him and his soldiers. However, he could not guarantee that this year would be equally successful. He proposed that instead of raiding other kingdoms, they should focus on strengthening the influence of their own kingdom and prepare for the upcoming monster invasion. He emphasized that this was the only way to protect their nation and citizens. King Rudolf listened attentively as the aristocrat with light brown hair expressed his concerns and arguments. He knew that Marquis Tendel, the leader of the first prince's faction, did not want the second prince to receive praise and attention through Duke Tajan Baylor's planned action. On one side were the followers of the first prince, while on the other side, the second prince's faction was represented. In the middle was King Rudolf, pondering in one wonder why both sides couldn't work together. He explained that he had heard the concerns of both parties, but also clarified that the reason for today's conference was different. King Rudolf wanted to introduce the aristocrats to a special magician, and asked this magician to enter the room. The door creaked open, and a magician stepped inside. His name was El, and he introduced himself to the group of nobles. As soon as he placed his hand on the table, something unexpected happened. A young man stood up quickly, surprising everyone. This man was Locke, the second son of the Tendel family. It hadn't even been a few seconds since El spoke when Locke interrupted rudely. He accused El of being a magician from the Luyas family, and insulted him loudly. El, however, stayed calm and moved next to the king without saying a word. The other nobles stared in shock at Locke, wondering why he reacted so strongly. Even Locke's father, Marquis Tendel, looked confused and asked his son why he was acting this way. Locke pointed directly at El, who still didn't show any reaction. He claimed he had something important to reveal about El. According to him, El had caused trouble at a hotel the previous night in the capital. Locke described El as a lowly, third-rate magician who had insulted him. He also said it was common knowledge that he, Locke, had been trying to propose to Countess Luius, but El had interfered. Locke claimed El had ruined his chances with the Countess. He reminded everyone in the room that although he didn't have an official title, he was still an important figure in the kingdom because of his noble heritage. He declared himself the second son of the Tendel family, and said his pride as a noble had been deeply hurt by El's behavior. Turning to the king, Locke boldly demanded that El not be trusted, and asked for immediate punishment. This left King Rudolf surprised, as he had not expected such a strong reaction to El's introduction. For a moment, the room went completely quiet. Locke stood there, glaring at El, his face filled with anger. He believed that as a noble, anyone who dared to oppose him should face harsh consequences. Meanwhile, El couldn't help but feel amused. A small smile began to appear on his face as he struggled to hold back laughter. Before the tension could escalate further, King Rudolf cleared his throat and asked everyone, including Locke, to calm down. He then gestured toward El and explained why he was there. The king introduced El as a powerful magician and an important ally for the kingdom. He emphasized that El's abilities would play a major role in securing the future of their land. Finally, he revealed that El was the owner of the magical tower. The king's words left the nobles speechless. Many wondered if they had heard correctly. For a magician to own a magical tower, he would have to be of the 7th level or higher. Such power could change the balance of power in the kingdom and influence decisions about the royal succession. The nobles began to whisper among themselves, trying to understand the implications. If El was truly as powerful as the king said, he would be on the same level as a marquis, an elite title in their society. Meanwhile, El's smile grew wider. He had been waiting for this moment. Raising his hand, he confidently offered to demonstrate his power if anyone doubted him. He channeled his mana, and a glowing blue magical circle appeared beneath his feet. Then, he prepared to show the nobles a small sample of his magic. In the center of the room, a swirling pool of mana formed. The energy sparkled and split into smaller pieces, filling the room with a magical glow. The nobles were mesmerized, watching as the mana spread gracefully throughout the space. At the same time, they began to feel the immense power radiating from it. The air grew heavy, and they could sense that El's magic was no ordinary display. Any doubts they had about him being an imposter disappeared instantly. Even Locke and his father, Marquis Tendel, were stunned by the beauty and strength of El's magic. When El saw that his demonstration had worked, he felt satisfied. He looked around the room confidently, seeing the awe on the faces of the nobles. King Rudolf suddenly broke into laughter, praising El for his incredible display. This caught El's attention, and he glanced at the king, who nodded approvingly. The king told El that it seemed the nobles were now convinced of his abilities, and that the demonstration had served its purpose. Taking the hint, El stopped the flow of his magic, the sparks in the air faded away and turned into tiny, glittering particles, which floated down like fairy dust over the nobles. Locke, who had been so bold just moments earlier, now looked pale and nervous. His confidence had vanished. The hand he had pointed at Elle was now pulled back, trembling slightly. Elle noticed this and thought that Locke had likely learned his lesson. He hoped that Locke would leave his cousin Rowellen alone from now on. Still, Elle silently resolved that if Locke dared to cause trouble again, he wouldn't be as forgiving next time. Locke began to understand the situation better as he looked at Elle's face. Even his own father realized how badly his son had handled things. He couldn't pick a side because it might push Elle away from supporting the prince. Because of this, the Marquis avoided looking at his son. Elle understood that he was ruining the mood at the table and that his presence might prevent any further discussion. So, he made it clear that he would leave. King Redolf apologized for the situation and expressed regret that Elle had come all this way for such a reason. As Elle walked toward the door he had entered through, he said it was fine. Before opening the door to leave, he turned to face the king and the nobles and told them he looked forward to what lay ahead. Then he walked out, shutting the door behind him. After Elle laughed, Roland laughed, knowing that Elle had planned every detail of the situation and that everything had gone exactly as Elle intended. King Redolf spoke again, reminding everyone that Elle was the savior of their kingdom and currently the most significant figure in the land. He emphasized that they should approach Elle with as much respect and gratitude as possible, even without saying it outright. The nobles realized that Prince Eudaimon, the third prince, backed by the hidden influence of the royal family, had the best chance of becoming the next king. It was also clear that by openly declaring the Master of the Magic Tower as the kingdom's most important person, the king was aligning himself with the Master's growing power. This, in turn, would strengthen Prince Eudaimon's position as the king supported him. This message was not lost on Marquis Tandel, who backed the first prince, or Duke Tajan Baylor, who supported the second prince. Both of them realized they needed to tread carefully and act wisely if they wanted their side to claim the throne. King Redolf announced that they needed to settle their differences and discuss both the Hessen kingdom and the influence of the Magic Tower Master together. For now, this topic would be postponed. This decision surprised Duke Tahin Baller, who hadn't expected such an outcome. The king then asked if there was anything else left to discuss. When no one responded, he became more serious and declared that if no other matters were on the agenda, the conference would end. He also made it clear that any questions about Elle should be saved for the next meeting. After concluding the conference, King Redolf left the room alone. He walked down a narrow hallway until he reached a door leading to Princess Elisa's study. He knocked, and a cheerful voice from inside asked who it was. When he said it was him, Princess Elisa replied with excitement, inviting him in. The king entered the room and saw his daughter sitting in a leather chair, reading a book in front of a large bookshelf. He knew how much she loved reading. King Redolf told his daughter that at 17 years old, she was the smartest and wisest princess in the land, which was why he trusted her completely. Elisa thanked him for the kind words and quickly guessed why he was there. She wasn't afraid to ask directly about his intentions. King Redolf then explained his challenging request. He wanted Princess Elisa to marry Elle for the good of the kingdom. This marriage would not only unite their family, but also bring additional power to the royal house, ensuring that Prince Eudaimon would secure the throne. The king repeatedly emphasized how important this was for their kingdom, explaining that through this alliance, their nation could grow stronger. He encouraged Elisa to meet Elle at the upcoming party and take the opportunity to get to know him. He told her he believed she would like Elle if she gave him a chance. As a father, he also expressed his belief that marrying the Master of the Magic Tower would be a good choice for her future and a meaningful step as a dutiful daughter. Princess Elisa agreed and said she would speak to Elle at the party if that was her father's wish. With a bright smile, she admitted she was curious about what Elle might be like. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated her expression as she spoke. Seeing that his daughter didn't seem entirely opposed to the idea, King Redolf felt relieved. He decided to leave her in peace, telling her he would see her at the party tomorrow. Elisa thanked him and said she was looking forward to it as well. After her father left, Elisa returned to the book she had been reading to one of the many shelves in the room. She stood by the window, gazing at the moon, and wondered about the master of the Golden Tower, whose symbol was gold. She couldn't help but think about what kind of person Elle might be. The next day, guests had already started gathering in the royal party hall. Elle and his cousin Rowellen were slowly making their way to the event. On the way, Elle asked Rowellen why she had laughed earlier. She replied that she thought everything was going as Elle had planned, and that the event seemed to align perfectly with his strategy. Elle clarified that his goal was to convince people more effectively through actions rather than words. He wanted his demonstration to ensure that no one would act recklessly toward him in the future. As they walked, Elle noticed something about Rowellen's clothing and commented on it. She asked him what he thought of her outfit and if he had any criticism. Elle pointed out that she was wearing a knight's uniform instead of a dress and asked why she chose such attire for this event. Rowellen simply responded that she wasn't there to impress anyone with a dress and saw no issue with wearing her uniform. Rowellen teased Elle, jokingly asking if he had hoped to see Rowellen in a glamorous dress. Elle, however, didn't find the joke funny and didn't respond with the same humor. Soon after, he offered to accompany Rowellen and together they entered the grand party hall. The hall was dazzling, filled with vibrant decorations and a majestic atmosphere. A luxurious scent filled the air, enhancing the royal vibe. The room was bustling with young nobles, all eager to meet Elle. His reputation as the Tower Master had clearly preceded him. As Elle and Rowland stepped into the magnificent hall, heads turned, and many nobles tried to approach them to start a conversation. For Rowland, the experience felt like a dream. Just weeks ago, she had been a countess living quietly in her small territory. Now she stood at the center of political power, surrounded by the highest-ranking nobles. She couldn't have imagined these aristocrats would show interest in her. She glanced at Elle and realized they were more interested in connecting with him than with her. Even so, she saw this as an opportunity to restore her family's name and reputation, even if it came at a great personal cost. Determined, Rowland greeted the young nobles and introduced herself. Elle watched her closely, hoping this moment would help her revive her family's honor. After the initial mingling, an announcement was made that the king was about to arrive. Moments later, the king entered the room with his daughter, Princess Elise, and took his seat on the throne. Holding a glass of wine, the king welcomed the guests and announced that the event was a party in honor of the Tower Master. He stated that they had all been eagerly awaiting his presence and invited everyone to toast to Elle. Elle was taken by surprise. He hadn't been informed that he would need to address the guests or lead a toast. Nonetheless, he quickly composed himself, stood formally, and introduced himself again. He expressed his gratitude for the honor of the event. To create a memorable moment, Elle raised his hands and conjured a flurry of small, glowing orange cherry blossoms. The blossoms floated gracefully around the room, creating a magical scene that delighted the guests. They admired the enchanting display, which added a festive and peaceful energy to the hall. Beyond the visual spectacle, Elle's magic had another effect. It helped to calm the tense atmosphere. Many of the nobles, who had been preoccupied with political rivalries and ambitions, seemed to relax. The spell even eased the mood of the king and Princess Elise, which brought a sense of relief to Elle. However, being the center of attention still made him uncomfortable. Seeking a moment of solitude, Elle quietly left the hall and stepped onto one of the outer balconies. Leaning against the railing, he gazed at the night sky. He sighed, reflecting on how exhausting it was to be surrounded by so many people. The constant attention from nobles, each with their own agendas, only made it harder for him to feel at ease. As he stood there, deep in thought, he heard someone approaching. A voice called out saying they had finally found him. Turning around, Elle saw Princess Elise smiling at him. She seemed curious and slightly amused by the situation. Elle politely acknowledged her presence, surprising the princess with his calm and respectful demeanor. She remarked that it was an honor to meet the Tower Master, and hinted that she believed Elle already understood the reason for her visit. Elle listened carefully before responding. He guessed that the king had spoken to her about the possibility of marriage. He acknowledged her intelligence and wisdom as a princess, and noted that she had rejected many suitors in the past. Elle hinted that this might be why she had taken the initiative to speak with him directly. The princess agreed with his guess and told him he was truly remarkable. But Princess Elise also made it clear she wasn't just there to follow her father's orders. She admitted to Elle that she wanted to know him better because she found him fascinating. This caught Elle off guard, and he asked if he had heard her right. Princess Elise explained that she had heard they were the same age and that he had already reached the 7th level of magic. She added that someone with such skills deserved a proper conversation. Elle was even more shocked by this, realizing the tone of their chat had changed. What started as her fulfilling her father's request turned into her expressing curiosity. She then asked Elle how he managed to gain such abilities. The princess looked at Elle with bright, eager eyes, waiting for his reply. Scratching his cheek, Elle said she might not believe it, but he had taught himself everything. The princess seemed surprised and said she thought geniuses were born that way. But Elle calmly told her he wasn't a genius, and that it was wrong to think so. He said that whether he was at the 7th or 8th level of magic didn't matter. He was just himself, no more special than anyone else. He explained that he was like any other person in the world and not different from them. Princess Elise stayed silent for a moment, then asked if he thought he was better than others because of his achievements. She pointed out that reaching the level of an archmage at his age was rare. She then shared a bit about herself, saying she was the princess of the Toan Kingdom. Though she had certain rights and duties, she didn't have the freedom to do what she wanted. She admitted that her family expected her to marry for the kingdom's sake, even if she didn't want to. This marriage, she explained, was part of her responsibilities. When Elle said that wasn't true, the princess's eyes widened in surprise. She looked calm, but also pained. Elle told her wisely that there were many ways she could serve her kingdom that had nothing to do with marriage. He advised her to focus on what she truly wanted, and said sacrificing herself was not the noble thing people made it out to be. The princess listened, amazed by Elle's perspective. He even offered to help her figure out her own path in life. Before leaving, Elle said he hoped she understood what he meant, and suggested they return to the party together. He then walked past her back to the hall, leaving her to reflect on his words. Princess Elise admired Elle for not going along with her father's plans and realized how special he was. She felt he truly understood her. As Elle left, he hoped his words had reached her. When he returned to the party, he noticed his cousin Raweline nearby and asked what she was doing there. Raweline said she was just taking a break and insisted she hadn't overheard Elle's conversation with the princess, even though she had. Elle told Rowland not to think he was being arrogant, but he hoped she could convince the nobles around her to support the third prince's faction. Rowland asked if Elle believed her support could balance the kingdom's political structure. Elle explained that her involvement could indeed strengthen the third prince's side. He added that currently, the first and second princes had more power, and boosting the third prince's faction could create stability. Rowland smiled, saying she trusted him completely and would do whatever he suggested. Elle thanked her with a handshake, and she replied that it was her who owed him thanks. Meanwhile, in a nearby forest that same night, the sky was filled with stars, and clouds began to gather. A robed figure climbed a small cliff, mentioning their arrival in the Tolan Kingdom. This was the place the High Priest OS had told them to find. Along with other priests, who were revealed to be Radiance Knights, they were there on a mission to locate the Holy One. The next day, King Riadofa's angry voice echoed through the castle as he demanded answers. He asked if it was true that the Holy One, mentioned in the oracle's prophecy, had been born in his kingdom. Priest Bolok stood confidently before the king, smiling faintly, and confirmed it was true. He asked the king if he could imagine anything more wonderful. However, King Riadofa questioned if the prophecy was being interpreted correctly. Bolok assured him that even if they were mistaken, another branch of the Holy Church would search nearby nations. But he added that all signs pointed to King Ridof's kingdom. The king rubbed his face and thought deeply about the implications. If the Holy One truly were in his kingdom, it would greatly increase the kingdom's influence and power. Currently, the Holy Kingdom had about the same size army and land as King Redolf's kingdom, but it was much stronger. It had the support of one of the 10 Grandmasters, making it hard for other countries to fight against it. King Redolf decided it would be wiser to help the Holy Kingdom in their mission to find the Holy One. He asked Priest Bolok how he could assist them. However, Priest Bolok explained that they didn't need much help right now, since they were strong enough to control the Holy One themselves. What they really needed was a leader to guide the Holy Knights to the place mentioned in the Oracle. Join us on this epic journey by subscribing to our channel and become a part of the quest to unveil the mysteries of the Holy One. King Ridof was surprised that all the priest wanted was a leader. He asked where this location predicted by the oracle was. Priest Bolok squinted slightly and said it was near a rugged area called the Levitin Plateau, which he suspected was close to the monster land in the western part of the continent. King Ridof immediately understood which place the priest meant and asked if it was true. However, he also warned Priest Bolok that this location was very dangerous and that the journey there would not be easy. He told the priest to rest for the day and promised to send someone tomorrow to guide him and his companions to the place. The priest thanked the king for his support and waved as King Ridof left the throne room. Walking down a small corridor, the king began to think about the trouble this situation could cause him. King Ridof realized that the Holy One might have a connection to El. If that were true, El would not give up easily. He decided he had to warn El immediately about the Holy Kingdom's intentions. As he walked, he called for his loyal friend Deslin, asking where he was. Ridof hurriedly opened a double door and found Deslin sitting at a table, enjoying some dumplings for lunch. Ridof rushed over, interrupted Deslin's meal, and ordered him to quickly set up the magical communication line with the magic tower. Before Deslin could ask any questions, Ridof explained that something very serious was happening, and they didn't have time to waste. Meanwhile, El and his mother, Claire, had spent over a year building a powerful barrier over Manor Valley. El, who was a 7th-level magician, worked hard alongside his mother to make the barrier strong. When they finally checked their work, they felt confident it could protect them from many attacks. To make it even stronger, they used the natural erosion from the ground. This addition ensured that once the mana flowed through the barrier, it would disrupt the magic of other magicians besides El and his mother. Magicians trying to use magic in that area would find their abilities weakened significantly. As El and his mother examined the barrier, Claire praised her son, saying he was becoming more remarkable every day, and that the barrier they made together was incredible. El smiled and reassured her, saying that even though there shouldn't be problems anytime soon, they still needed to stay cautious, because fate was unpredictable. At that moment, El's younger sister Kanak came running toward him, shouting frantically. She called for El, saying he had received an urgent magical message and needed to come quickly. Surprised, El asked her what was going on. Kanak, out of breath, wrote down that the message was magical and urgent. El and his mother were puzzled but decided to check the message immediately. El told his mother to return to the magic tower and rest while he teleported away to investigate. However, Claire felt uneasy. Her maternal instincts told her something was wrong, and she started to worry. El teleported directly to his office in the magic tower, where he found a magical mirror. Looking into it, he saw his reflection and stretched out his hand to receive the message. The mirror showed King Ridof's face. Ridof greeted El, saying it had been a long time since they last spoke. He quickly explained that there was an emergency. Curious, El asked what was wrong, guessing that the Holy Kingdom was somehow involved. Surprised, Ridof asked how El had already guessed that. El replied that he had heard rumors about the Holy Kingdom invading nearby lands and exploring them. The king then asked El if the rumors about a new saint in his kingdom were true. El confirmed that they were. Ridof warned him that if the saint was with them, there would likely be a confrontation with the Holy Kingdom. The king also asked if El had a plan for dealing with this situation. As the Holy Kingdom's army was strong, and their soldiers wouldn't hesitate to fight to the death, El clenched his fist, trying to control his emotions. He explained to Ridof that the saint was a member of his own family. He firmly added that his plan did not involve simply handing over his family member to the Holy Kingdom. El shared the story of how saints are created. He explained that it happens when an ordinary female magician loses all her mana and becomes filled with holy magic. He emphasized that even they were shocked by this event. El told King Ridolf that just because a family member had gained holy magic, they couldn't simply hand her over. He believed the king would understand this if he thought about how they had lived their lives so far. El then recounted the heartbreaking past of his sister Serna. She had suffered as a slave before he and his mother rescued her. El further explained that his mother would never allow her daughter to live the life of a saint, even after hearing the full story. King Ridolf reminded El that the Holy Kingdom was a powerful nation, with an army of holy soldiers so strong that even an empire would struggle to defeat them. He pointed out that even for someone as skilled as El, who had reached the 7th level of magic, it would not be easy to deal with such a force. El, however, stood firm, declaring that he would never give up. He confidently said he would protect his sister no matter what. He told the king that if he couldn't keep someone close to him safe, he wouldn't consider them part of his family. The king was taken aback by El's strong determination. El then asked if he could make a request. He wanted the king to stay neutral on the matter until everything was resolved. When the king asked for clarification, El assured him that this was all he needed. El explained that if the king remained neutral, he would ensure there was no conflict with the Holy Kingdom and would overcome the challenges himself. The king understood and promised to keep the location of El's magic tower a secret. He also spoke cautiously, reminding El of the difficulties the kingdom faced in ignoring the Holy Kingdom's search requests. El listened carefully as the king explained that the kingdom couldn't completely disregard the Holy Kingdom's demands. The king admitted it wouldn't be easy to avoid revealing the tower's location indefinitely. El acknowledged this, but assured the king that it would take the Holy Kingdom at least a month to locate the tower. He vowed to solve the issue within that time. The king, impressed by El's resolve, told him to remember that he was a valuable ally, even if direct support wasn't possible. El was deeply moved by the king's words, feeling grateful that someone outside his family cared for his well-being. After their conversation ended, El turned to the window of his room. As he gazed at the city he had built, glittering under the sunlight, he clenched his fist. El reaffirmed his commitment to protect his family and those he loved, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, the priest who had informed the king about the new saint made his way to Rowellan estate to continue his search. Rowellan welcomed the priest warmly and apologized for keeping him waiting. They sat across from each other at a large round table, the same one where El had once gathered with his family. As the Countess of the Louis family, Rowellan expressed her honor in hosting the priest. She also mentioned that she hoped his long journey hadn't been too tiring. The priest, leaning slightly on the table, shared that he had been traveling for a month. He thought back to how helpful the guide, assigned by the king, had been during the journey. The guide had pointed out the direction of the village they sought, but the priest had initially doubted him. He had thought they needed to go in the opposite direction. However, the guide reassured him that he knew the area well, since he had been born and raised in the kingdom. He had promised the priest that he could be trusted to lead him to the saint. Reflecting on this, the priest realized his doubts were unnecessary. The guide had successfully brought him to Rolwyn's estate, which had also been endorsed by the king. Rowellan politely asked the priest why he had come to the estate. The priest explained that he was searching for the saint, who was said to be in the Thean kingdom. He hoped she could help him in his mission. Rowellan assured him that she was willing to assist in any way she could. The priest explained that the oracle had described the saint's location as a place filled with magic and situated on a plateau with harsh surroundings. He asked Rowena if she could think of a place that matched this description. Rowellan considered his question carefully. She told him that the entire area was rich in magic, making it unsafe in general. Hearing this, the priest became more specific. He asked if she had heard rumors about a new magic tower being built in the region. Rowellan acted like she didn't know exactly where the magic tower was. She explained to the priest that she had only heard rumors about it. This made the priest even more curious, so he kept questioning her. He mentioned that he had searched the area but couldn't find it. He guessed that the tower might be near Manticore Gorge. Hearing this, Rin became slightly nervous, though she tried to keep up her act. She warned the priest not to go there alone because it was dangerous, and he wouldn't find anything. However, the priest noticed her hesitation and asked if it wasn't odd that he hadn't encountered any monsters in the area. Even after a month, he wondered if the monsters had all disappeared somehow. Rowellan was startled by his observation and couldn't come up with a clear reply. Instead, she kept pretending and told him it must be because of his incredible luck and skill. She said his divine power probably scared the monsters away before they could show themselves. The priest's lips curved into a sly smile, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he scratched the back of his head and thanked his goddess, acting humble by saying it was probably just luck. Then, he got up and told Rowellan that his questioning was over. He announced that he would explore the wild areas around Linda's territory himself. He apologized for taking up her time and left with the royal guide. As they walked, the guide asked where they were heading. The priest confidently replied that the saint was in the magic tower near Manticore Gorge. Determined to find her, his face showed his eagerness. He believed they were close to achieving their goal and told the guide that finding the saint was their top priority and they couldn't fail. As the priest and his group moved towards Manor Gorge, Rowellan watched them leave through her window. She felt relieved that her plan had worked perfectly, and the priest reacted just as she wanted. Turning away from the window, she felt proud that her part of luring the priest to Manor Gorge had been successful. She hoped El was also doing well with his plan. Meanwhile, the priest gathered his followers and set off toward the tower. One of his followers pointed out the strange absence of monsters in the area, but advised staying cautious. Another follower wondered why anyone would build a tower in such a remote location. The priest dismissed the question, saying the tower's builder must have been either a fool or extremely bold. He didn't care, as long as they completed their mission. When they arrived at a rocky cliff, the priest declared it to be the entrance to the tower. He believed the tower was hidden behind the wall and gave his followers permission to kill anyone who resisted. El, who had been observing, confronted the priest. He criticized the priest for being cruel and asked if servants of the gods should act with such harshness. El argued that they should treat regular people with the same kindness they showed their deity. The priest, who didn't realize El was the master of the tower, asked who he was. El smiled and turned the question back on him, asking why people from the Holy Land had entered his territory without permission. The priest was startled and asked if he had heard correctly that the land belonged to El. Realizing the implications, the priest's eyes widened, and he asked if El was the golden master of the tower. El laughed and sarcastically asked what the priest would do if he really were. The priest couldn't fully grasp the situation. He wondered if it was possible for someone so young to be the master of a magical tower. His thoughts wandered to rumors he had heard about a young magician who had caused major losses to the Einhart family in the Bell Kingdom. This magician was said to have the extraordinary ability to raise a golem to the level of a Grandmaster's Knight. Together with this powerful golem, the magician had fought as a 7th-level mage. The priest wondered if this person could be the same one who had built the tower here. His attitude shifted. He politely asked El if he could speak with him and explained that he had traveled far from the Holy Kingdom to find the saint. He asked if the saint was in the magic tower. El's expression turned serious as he confirmed that the saint was indeed there, under his protection. The priest was thrilled to hear this, feeling relieved to have found her at last. However, when El firmly stated that he would not hand the saint over, the priest's mood changed. His eyes widened as he asked El what he meant by that. El calmly explained that the saint was his fiancée. The priest was stunned. He couldn't believe that the saint, who was considered the purest and most noble being in the world, could have any connection to a man. Anger took over, and he refused to accept El's claim. He yelled that this would never happen, and promised to do everything to stop it. The priest pointed at El and told his followers that even if El was really a 7th-level magician, he wouldn't be able to overcome the anti-magic spell of the holy armor. He urged them to attack the saint. The priest commanded his followers to begin the mission and bring back the saint no matter what. The followers, full of determination, raised their fists and promised to complete the task for their god. El simply shook his head, expecting this reaction from the Holy Church. He knew people would act like this after hearing that the saint had a fiancé. El created a small black hole under his feet and appeared in front of the priests and their followers through another black hole. The priest, clearly angry, shouted and demanded to know how El dared to stand before him so boldly. Without hesitation, he ordered his followers to attack El. They all charged toward him, even though El stood calmly with his hands at his sides. Before they could get close, a magical green circle glowed beneath them, and red lights shot upward. El chuckled, amused. The priests were trapped in El's glowing green circle. As they stood frozen, El raised his hand and cast a spell called Black Mist. Instantly, a dark cloud surrounded the priests, and they couldn't see anything. The priest leader turned to his group, asking what this strange mist was. His followers, equally confused, demanded El explain the magic, as they had never seen anything like it before. The priest leader believed it was a trap set by the tower master. Angry, he scolded his group for not acting quickly against the mist, and ordered them to use their anti-magic powers. One of the priests agreed, and reminded the others of their mission. All the priests raised their hands toward the sky, summoning a light spell. Slowly, the shining aura started to clear the black mist. El, impressed by their effort, smiled. He decided to get more serious, and show the priests how powerful his dark mist truly was. Raising his hand again, El cast a stronger version of the black mist. This time, the priest's light spell disappeared instantly, replaced by a towering black column of darkness. The priests were once again swallowed by the mist. Even the experienced magicians among them couldn't resist El's magic, which blocked all their senses. El took out a small pair of glasses from his pocket, put them on, and smiled as he stepped into the mist. Inside, the black mist caused the holy knights to lose all sense of direction. Confused and disoriented, the priests realized they couldn't rely on their senses, but were too stubborn to give up. One of the stronger priests encouraged his companions not to panic, saying the mist was just an illusion. He told them to focus and use the blessing of light again. The priests tried raising their hands to cast the spell once more. At first it looked like the light spell might work again, pushing back the mist like before. But this time the priests struggled to maintain their magic. One of them asked their leader why he wasn't helping or using his holy powers to support them. The priests grew weaker, one by one, losing the strength to keep casting the spell. Desperately, they waited for their leader, Archpriest Bolak, to step in and save them. Meanwhile, outside the magic tower, El's soldiers, who had met him after he saved their village, were waiting for his return. They kept looking toward the city, eager for El to come back. Captain Mater reassured his comrades, saying El would return soon and end their waiting. Just then, a voice called out, announcing their arrival. The soldiers turned and saw El, carrying one of the priests on his shoulder. It was their leader, Bolak. El threw the unconscious priest to the ground. Mater asked El if this man was after his sister, the Holy Mistress, and wondered if they should deal with him. El, looking down sadly, told his soldiers to observe everything for now, and not take any action yet. The soldiers all knelt before El, promising to follow his orders no matter what happened. This unexpected loyalty surprised El, who hadn't anticipated such devotion. Noticing El's reaction, one of the soldiers confirmed their pledge of eternal loyalty. The soldier then asked El if they could truly win, implying that opposing the Holy Kingdom was dangerous while trying to protect the saint. El smiled and confidently said they would win. Losing was simply not an option for him. He raised his right hand and made a few gestures in the air. Suddenly, magical glasses and handcuffs appeared out of nowhere, falling in front of the soldiers. El handed these items to his men, explaining their purpose. The glasses could cancel the effects of his black mist, while the handcuffs could seal the power of holy magic. When Captain Mater was handed the bag of artifacts and given the explanation, he was completely shocked. El told him to use these special items to capture the remaining knights of the Holy Kingdom, still trapped in the black mist. El explained further that once the handcuffs were put on the knights, they would lose their strength and become as weak as ordinary men. Armed with El's artifacts, the soldiers prepared for the mission. They were highly motivated and walked into the dark mist. Inside the mist, the soldiers could see the shapes of enemy knights lying on the ground, looking tired and lost. The knights had no idea where they were. Suddenly, L's soldiers captured them, catching the knights completely off guard. The enemy soldiers cursed loudly, but they were helpless because they were trapped in the thick fog. One desperate knight used all his remaining strength to attack blindly, rushing forward in anger. However, Captain Mater stopped him with ease and took him down. The knight, clearly furious, gritted his teeth and shouted in frustration as he fell. Barely able to keep his eyes open, he saw Captain Mater locking the handcuffs on his wrists. The knight knew he couldn't give up, but his body had no strength left, and his eyes finally closed. Once Captain Mater and his troops had captured all the Holy Kingdom soldiers, they brought them to L. L told Captain Mater he was relieved everything had gone smoothly. He also instructed Mater to treat the captured knights carefully and not harm them. L knew a bigger battle was coming, and he was certain the Holy Kingdom wouldn't stay quiet after learning their soldiers had been captured. 2 weeks later, news reached the Holy Kingdom about the capture of their soldiers. A meeting was quickly held to decide what to do next. The kingdom's leaders gathered in the Grand White Chapel, sitting at a round table near a shining altar. The eldest priest spoke first, telling the others that it had been 2 weeks since Archpriest Bolek had gone to the Manor Kingdom village. He noted that there had been no contact with their troops since then, which was a clear sign that something had gone wrong. The priests around the table whispered to each other, trying to guess what might have happened. One priest admitted he was so worried about the situation that he couldn't sleep properly, and he hoped his friend was safe. The eldest priest explained that the last message he received mentioned a new magic tower appearing in the region Bolek went to scout. It seemed the tower's master had captured the Holy Kingdom's men. Hearing this, the other priests were shocked and kept repeating his words in disbelief. The eldest priest confirmed the report, but admitted they didn't know if it was completely accurate. Even so, he said they had to act, since their soldiers were missing. Another priest suggested sending a search party and asked for opinions. At this point, a younger priest stood up and asked for permission to speak. The elder priest nodded, giving him the floor. The young priest explained that the situation was very serious and not something to take lightly. He said that if a saint had appeared after so many years, it must be part of a great divine plan. He reminded everyone that they had been guided to the saint and must follow the divine will. Because of this, he believed sending a small search party would be inappropriate. The other priests were surprised by the young priest's boldness. He went on to propose sending one of the Holy Kingdom's strongest forces, the Holy Knights, with the Silver Cross. Even the elder priests looked shocked and asked if he was referring to Duke Diard. Duke Diard and the Knights of the Silver Cross made up about 30% of the Holy Kingdom's army and were incredibly powerful. Duke Diard himself was a Grand Master, capable of defeating many skilled swordsmen in battle. He was the kingdom's pride and its greatest weapon. After thinking for a moment, the elder priest asked the group for their opinions on sending Duke Diard. Several priests agreed immediately, saying it was time to show the kingdom's strength and prove that opposing them was a mistake. With the agreement of the other priests, the elder priest slammed his hands on the table and ordered Duke Diard and the Knights of the Silver Cross to be mobilized. His face lit up with excitement as he imagined capturing the saint soon. To ensure success, he also decided that several high priests would join Duke Diard on the mission to provide additional support. This announcement shocked some of the priests, who couldn't understand why the entire military force was being sent all at once. The elder priest explained that the saint, now under their protection, had great powers. He emphasized that this time, they would need to break this incredible power to save the saint. The priests at the table were just as eager as their leader and clearly understood the message. Once again, the elder priest stressed the importance of showing the strength of the Holy Kingdom in this mission. Raising his hand toward the sky, he declared that anyone who backed out would seal their own fate. The other priests at the table bowed, placed their hands on their hearts, and started praying while carefully considering their next moves. El spent some time finding his good friend Dibel. When they met, El shared the whole story, leaving Dibel stunned and unable to believe what he had heard. Feeling pleased with himself, El grinned, amused by Dibel's shock. Dibel was astonished that El had captured the saint and was also holding the priests of the Holy Kingdom as hostages. El, what was his plan was? But El only smiled. Frustrated, Dibel smacked his own forehead, struggling to understand. He demanded to know why El would make an enemy of the Holy Kingdom, especially since most people tried to avoid fighting with them. El sat down, took a sip from his teacup, and told Dibel that he had no choice. He explained that he wouldn't let the Holy Kingdom take his beloved sister away. Anger and determination filled El's eyes as he said he couldn't stand by and let anyone take something important from him, especially not the Holy Kingdom. Dibel pressed him again to reveal his exact plans. El calmly stated that the Holy Kingdom would likely regroup its army and send another force to attack him. Folding his hands, he explained that if that happened, he would try to negotiate with them. He had no intention of relying only on violence. Dibel asked if El had a backup plan. El explained that he didn't need one for now because the hostages were a strong bargaining chip. He believed this would force the other side to meet his demands without much trouble. Dibel sighed and said it didn't feel like he was involved in this scheme, and frankly, he didn't want to be. Even though Dibel preferred not to get directly involved, he admitted that he could help behind the scenes if needed. Eldon revealed why he had sought Dibel out. He needed a favor. Since they had taken hostages, there were more mouths to feed. He asked Dibel to organize additional food supplies. El also told him to slowly stop the supply of Manakor blood. Shocked by this request, Dibel asked why. El simply smiled and said he had his reasons. Although confused, Dibel agreed to follow El's instructions. Meanwhile, in the Holy Kingdom, preparations moved quickly. The Silver Cross Knights were always ready for action, so it took only 3 days to organize them. Another 2 days were spent preparing for the war. The Duke, a man with long dark brown hair, wore armor like the other knights. The elder priest thanked the Duke for his quick response and reminded him that the saint's safety was now in his hands. The Duke promised to do his best to complete the mission successfully. The elder priest explained that this mission was extremely important and that the 3 high priests also had critical roles to play. He hoped everyone would return safely and without serious injuries. The 3 priests who were assigned to assist the Duke and the knights assured their leader that they would carry out the mission successfully. They promised to rescue their captured comrades and bring the saint back. After everyone understood their roles, Duke Diad stepped forward and cast a teleportation spell. A magical circle appeared behind him, and the air around the group started to glow and swirl powerfully. The entire square lit up and became windy. The destination for Duke Diard and his knights was the Methane Plain. This area lay between the Manticore Valley and the mountains in Count Rubius's territory. It used to be part of Count Rubius's lands, but was abandoned due to manticores spreading from the valley. Before moving out, Duke Diard reminded his Silver Cross knights that their missing comrades were last seen near the Manor Gorge. He told them they wouldn't waste time and would head straight to the Manticore Gorge without stopping. The Knights' captain confirmed the orders. Together with Duke Diard, they raised their fists to the sky and shouted for their deity. Determined, they marched toward the Manor Gorge. When they arrived at the entrance, a thick mist surrounded the area. Duke Diard noticed that the fog, along with the landscape, made the gorge feel like a natural fortress, blocking any easy attack. The leader of the Knights suggested sending a few skilled warriors into the village to scout and gather information. Duke Diard thought it was a good idea and approved the plan. The Knight leader quickly sent 6 elite paladins and 15 regular ones ahead, while he stayed back to wait for their return. However, time passed, and none of the paladins came back. Confused and worried, the Knight captain began to wonder what could have happened to them. Realizing something was wrong, Duke Diard suspected the strange fog surrounding them held some kind of mysterious power. Determined to uncover the truth, he decided to investigate it himself. As he prepared to leave, the Knight captain hurried to warn him, saying it might even be dangerous for someone as powerful as a Grand Master. Ignoring the warning, Duke Diard ordered the remaining knights to follow him cautiously and step by step. He asked them if they understood, and they responded with a firm, "Yes, sir," before following him into the mist. As Duke Diard led his group deeper into the fog, the visibility became worse with every step. The fog grew so thick that even he could barely see his hand in front of his face. He advanced carefully, like a blind man, feeling his way forward to avoid bumping into anything. Suddenly, he stopped and looked around, realizing that he had somehow lost his companions. Alarmed, he called out for his knights, but received no reply. He quickly drew his hammer-shaped weapon, determined to fight whatever danger might be hiding in the fog. Duke Diard struck the ground hard with his hammer while shouting the name of his god. The strike created a massive shockwave that pushed the fog away from him. As the mist started to clear, he was shocked to see a grand golden tower and a scattered city before him. It was a sight he hadn't expected to find in the isolated Manor Gorge. Just as he was taking in the view, he heard someone cursing softly behind him, muttering about how it had come to this point. Duke Diard spun around and saw his knights wandering aimlessly, their eyes blank as if they were in a daze. He couldn't believe what he was seeing and wondered what had happened to them. The voice he had heard earlier spoke again, regretting that things had to turn out this way and complaining about the wasted time. Turning once more to locate the source of the voice, Duke Diard finally saw someone waiting for him. El greeted him with a polite smile, introducing himself as the new master of the Golden Tower. Duke Diard, still holding his hammer, demanded to know if El was responsible for creating the fog. El admitted it with a calm smile, saying that it was only natural to protect oneself when approached by someone with unclear intentions. Diard, now visibly angry, clenched his teeth as El teased him, asking why he looked so furious. Realizing there was no point in pretending, Duke Diard admitted that his mission was not entirely peaceful. He then directly asked El if he was holding someone sacred captive. El only smiled, saying it might look that way. This admission enraged Duke Diard, who yelled at El, his frustration showing his veins bulged on his forehead. El replied that the so-called sacred figure was a member of his own family and that he didn't care about their title. Diard tried to explain that, even so, the person held sacred should not be treated this way, as ordinary people must follow the will of God. El interrupted, raising his voice to ask what exactly this will of God was, and why humans should follow it blindly. Duke Diard ignored the question, declaring that fate isn't something one submits to. It must be forged with strength. He then raised his hammer, infusing it with his energy, which made it glow golden. El watched this display with amusement, acknowledging that it was impressive, but he wasn't without his own tricks. He summoned a Golden Knight Golem, which charged at Duke Diard with incredible speed. The Golem's attack forced Diard backward, but he managed to block the blow and avoid injury. Undeterred, El raised a small glowing orb into the air and cast a spell called Pleiades. A massive golden arrow appeared above him, aimed directly at Duke Diard. The arrow shot toward its target with incredible force, but Diard saw it coming just in time. He swung his glowing hammer and deflected the arrow, sending it crashing to the ground near his feet. If you're enjoying these epic battles, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more magical confrontations. Although Duke Diard had successfully defended against the attack, he couldn't deny the immense power behind it. El, however, remained composed, arrogantly stating that he hadn't been trying to harm Diard, but merely wanted to scare him a little. El's calm demeanor and confidence frustrated Duke Diard even further, as the confrontation between the two seemed far from over. Duke Diard turned to his knights, demanding to know if they planned to join the fight or just stand by and watch. The knights, standing in their pale blue formation, explained that they couldn't move because they were surrounded by an invisible barrier. This shocked Duke Diard, who hadn't noticed it earlier, and it only explained that the barrier was there to prevent weaker fighters from getting hurt by accident. He also pointed to a rocky ledge where the 59 knights Duke Diard had sent earlier were unharmed and had not even received a single scratch. Fuming, Duke Diard lashed out at El, calling the situation outrageous. El responded by teasing him, saying he sounded like an old man. This only enraged Duke Diard further. His face turned red, and a vein on his forehead bulged with anger. He grumbled to the knights behind him but couldn't stop staring at El. El then explained that, as Duke Diard could plainly see, there was no one left to assist him. He added that the panic visible in the Duke's expression made him sad, and said this was the price one had to pay for the choices made by the Holy Kingdom. Duke Diard demanded to know what El meant by price, and angrily declared that El would soon pay it himself. El simply smiled and asked, would it really come to that? This comment made Duke Diard even angrier. Then El suggested a bet. Intrigued, but still fuming, Duke Diard asked what kind of bet El had in mind. El explained that his golem, the Golem Knight, his masterpiece, was as powerful as a Grand Master. The bet was simple. If El won, Duke Diard would free his people. If the Golem won, Duke Diard himself would become El's prisoner. Duke Diard burst out laughing, mocking the idea as absurd. He confidently joked about the possibility of becoming a prisoner, asking if he was allowed to destroy the golem. El, proud of his creation, replied, into 1,000 pieces if you can. Still smiling, El warned Duke Diard to worry about his own safety first. Without hesitation, Duke Diard raised his golden hammer and launched an attack. He swung it in a powerful arc, generating such intense energy that even El had to shield his face. The Duke's bloodlust and eagerness for battle were clear as a grin spread across his face, showing his thirst for revenge. El raised his hand, commanding Tana to destroy the target. Tana, always precise, identified her target and confirmed the order. Without delay, she drew her sword and leapt into action. Her blade struck forward, cutting off Duke Diard's swirling attack mid-motion. Their powerful strikes collided, creating a massive cloud of dust. Tana dodged the Duke's counterattacks, while her own blows were skillfully blocked. Determined to overpower her, Duke Diard prepared for another devastating strike. Once again, his hammer clashed with Tana's sword in a display of sheer force. The knights watching from behind the blue barrier were stunned. They couldn't believe that their leader was facing an opponent just as strong as him. Even Duke Diard grudgingly admitted to himself that El's golem was incredibly powerful, matching the strength of a grandmaster. But instead of admiring it, this realization only made him angrier, and he tightened his grip on his weapon. With a furious scream, Duke Diard hurled his golden hammer high into the air. It began to shine brightly, catching the attention of everyone present. Even the soldiers watching were puzzled by the sudden change. The hammer's outer golden layer started to peel away, revealing a darker black weapon beneath. El, temporarily blinded by the light, could only wonder what was happening. The unveiled weapon was none other than the Divine Hammer, a sacred relic designed to destroy evil. It was one of 3 legendary relics, possessing incredible power but incapable of harming anything not considered evil. For the first time, El was truly speechless. The unexpected turn of events left him in awe. Duke Diard noticed El's reaction and smirked, praising him for recognizing the weapon so quickly. The Duke explained that he never intended to use such a powerful relic unless it was absolutely necessary. El understood how dire the situation had become and knew he needed a new plan quickly. Even the Knights of the Silver Cross, standing in awe behind the barrier, were stunned. They had never seen the Divine Hammer in action, nor had they expected to witness its immense power. El's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The Divine Hammer was one of 3 sacred relics known to be the strongest on the continent. Alongside it were the 5 great sacred swords and the 5 great demons, each considered legendary weapons of incredible might. The Divine Hammer in particular was infamous for its authority to destroy anything non-divine. Now, with such a weapon in Duke Diard's hands, the battle had taken a dangerous turn. El's calm demeanor gave way to concern as he realized the true threat he was facing. Meanwhile, Duke Diard prepared to unleash the full force of his sacred relic, ready to put an end to the battle. El quickly realized that the hammer Duke Diard was using wasn't an ordinary weapon. It was specially designed to counteract aura blades and completely erase the magic of a 7th-class magician, leaving no trace behind. Duke Diard spun the hammer in the air once more, its power evident, and told El that forcing him to rely on such a powerful weapon was proof of El's impressive strength. However, Duke Diard added that this was the end for El and his golem. With those words, he charged forward and swung the hammer at Tana, the golem. Tana barely dodged the attack, moving at the last possible second to avoid being struck directly. Despite the hammer missing its target, its power was still felt. The energy within the weapon seemed to change, releasing its full might. The force of the swing created a small crater on the battlefield, a stark reminder of just how dangerous Duke Diard and his weapon truly were. El couldn't help but acknowledge the overwhelming power once again. Duke Diard didn't let up. He was determined to keep El and Tana under pressure. He roared loudly, diving straight into his next attack. Tana instinctively stepped back, reacting to the ferocity of his charge. Duke Diard smirked, visibly satisfied that the mighty golem was retreating just from his shout. He found it admirable that Tana was still standing her ground in the fight, but he knew she wouldn't last much longer. Turning his focus back to El, Duke Diard taunted him, asking what he would do next, since his options were running out. Without waiting for a response, the Duke leaped into the air, raising his hammer high to deliver what he intended to be the final blow. El quickly ordered Tana to dodge again, and she narrowly escaped. The hammer struck the ground with such force that nearby rocks were dislodged, flying in all directions as Tana held her defensive stance amidst the chaos. Realizing the close range wasn't working in their favor, El gave Tana new instructions. He commanded her to create more distance from the Duke. Tana followed the order, shifting into her long-range mode. She began firing bursts of green energy toward Duke Diard, but he blocked them effortlessly. Once again, the Duke prepared to counterattack. With a powerful swing, he hurled his hammer directly at El. Watching the weapon fly toward him, El admitted to himself that he had underestimated Duke Diard yet again. But this time, he wasn't about to hold back. El extended his hand forward, and Tana suddenly disappeared from sight. Duke Diard froze for a moment, surprised by the sudden disappearance of the golden golem. He spun around, confused, and asked El where Tana had gone. Just as he began to lower his guard, Tana reappeared behind him, catching him off guard. Duke Diard turned to face her and muttered that it must be some sort of magic. El responded calmly, explaining that this was his secret weapon. He confessed that he had never expected Duke Diard to bring out a divine warhammer. But now that he had, El had no choice but to reveal his trump card. Duke Diard's anger flared again, and he resolved to give everything he had to land a decisive blow. El, however, suggested that they should end the battle here, reasoning that continuing the fight was pointless. Internally, El acknowledged the difficulty of defeating Duke Diard. The holy relic he wielded gave him the strength to match even Tana at her full power. Duke Diard dismissed El's words, accusing him of arrogance. In response, El made an unexpected gesture of goodwill. He promised to release the people Duke Diard had been fighting for, ensuring they were unharmed. To prove his sincerity, El lifted the magical barrier that had been holding the first 50 captives. Duke Diard immediately instructed the leader of the Silver Cross Knights to take care of the freed individuals, and the leader acted without hesitation. After ensuring his people were safe, Duke Diard turned back to El with another question. He asked if El had captured a priest named Bolok, who might be among the scattered knights. This time, El refused to answer. The Duke's frustration boiled over, and he cursed El for his sly grin. El, amused, casually asked why a simple smile was enough to make Duke Diard so angry. Enraged, the Duke shouted that while he might leave empty-handed today, he would return to take the saint next time. El calmly remarked that accomplishing such a goal would not be easy. Later, back at the headquarters of the Silver Cross Knights, the group took a brief rest. Although they appeared uninjured, their exhaustion was evident. The leader of the Knights noted that many of them were likely suffering from internal injuries, despite their outward appearance of being fine. He estimated that it would take at least a month for them to recover fully. This news infuriated Duke Diard, who clenched his teeth in frustration and muttered about the stress building up. Meanwhile, in the desert realm of Deek, one of the 5 great realms, trouble was unfolding at the Temple of the Reared Goddess sect. This holy site had recently received a significant shipment of manticore blood through the Jebel trading post. The priests at the temple used this blood to create potions, earning enormous profits. Archbishop Bolok, who had overseen the operation, gained substantial support within the sect. However, the regular supply of manticore blood suddenly stopped, putting the archbishop in a difficult situation. When he was informed that the supply was dwindling, Bolok panicked, unsure of how to handle the crisis. He wanted to understand why the blood supply was running out, and knew he had to speak to Debel immediately. When he arrived at Debel's shop, they sat together at a table and had tea. The archbishop, eager to get answers, quickly asked why the manor had stopped providing as much blood. Staying calm, Debel told him not to worry and encouraged him to enjoy the tea. With a friendly smile, Debel even mentioned how good the tea was. The archbishop, trying to stay composed, blew on the hot tea and took a sip before repeating his question, pressing Debel for an explanation about the misdeliveries. Debel admitted there were some issues. The archbishop, now more curious, asked what the problems were and what had caused them. Adjusting his glasses, which hung on a golden chain, Debel said it was something he couldn't explain easily. The archbishop reminded him they were allies and questioned why they should hide things from each other. After some hesitation, Debel said he would share the secret only if the archbishop promised to keep it confidential. Feeling the urgency of the matter, the archbishop agreed and urged Debel to reveal the truth. Debel then confessed that the reared temple would no longer receive manticore blood. The archbishop was shocked and pleaded with Debel to say it wasn't true. However, Debel assured him it was and began to explain. He revealed that the blood was sourced from Manticore Gorge, where a 7th-class mage had set up a base. This mage captured manticores and extracted their blood. The archbishop listened intently as Debel went on, explaining that the blood supply depended on an agreement with the Tower Master, who managed distribution across the continent. But recently, the Tower Master had encountered some serious difficulties. The archbishop immediately wanted to know what kind of trouble the Tower Master was facing. Lowering his voice, Debel revealed that the Tower Master had agreed to be under the protection of the Holy Virgin. The archbishop was taken aback, struggling to process the information. Debel explained that this arrangement might lead to increased tensions between the Tower Master and the Holy Kingdom. The archbishop swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. Debel asked if the news wasn't shocking, to which the archbishop admitted it was difficult to believe. Debel reassured him that his reaction was natural, as he himself was surprised when he first heard about it. The archbishop knew how powerful the Holy Kingdom was, supported by the will of the goddess Gaia. When the Holy Kingdom acted, many other nations loyal to the goddess followed, giving it immense influence, greater than even the largest empires. This thought made the archbishop anxious. After regaining his composure, he turned back to Debel and asked about the future of the blood supply, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation. Debel, smiling, assured him he was fully aware of the problem. The archbishop then asked if Debel had a solution. Debel responded confidently, saying there was no need to panic, and noted that the Tower Master was much stronger than people realized. As the archbishop sipped his tea, he winced from the heat and rubbed his temples, trying to relax. Debel then asked why the archbishop seemed so worried about the Holy Kingdom. He wondered if the archbishop's church didn't have enough influence to stand against it. The archbishop admitted he didn't know all the details, but acknowledged that the Holy Kingdom was far more powerful than his own church. Clapping his hands, Debel suggested that the archbishop's church could form alliances with others to counter the Holy Kingdom. The Archbishop looked at Diebel, considering his suggestion. Diebel pointed out that the reared church wasn't alone. It was one of 5 major churches in the kingdom. The Archbishop agreed and began to think about the possibility of uniting the churches to stand against the Holy Kingdom. Diebel could see that his idea had taken root. The Archbishop said he understood and would inform the Grand Chancellor to begin working on the plan. Diebel added that if things went well, he could provide 150,000 soldiers to the reared church within 3 months. Hearing this, the Archbishop smiled and warmly thanked Diebel. Meanwhile, in the Holy Kingdom of Gaia, the oldest priest angrily slammed his hand on the table. He demanded an explanation about what had happened. A group of priests gathered around a large round table, except for 3 who were absent, attending to Duke Diard. Some priests were puzzled about how the situation had escalated, while others asked what they should do next. The oldest priest angrily threw some papers into the air, asking if anyone had even read the message carefully. He couldn't understand why such a commotion was being made over the Holy Virgin, or why they had received a warning. He also wondered when others had started behaving so arrogantly toward them. Another priest mentioned how they had carefully contacted the owner of the Blue Magical Tower for help, only to receive an unexpected response. A different priest, looking defeated, admitted that everything was confusing, and said he couldn't understand why even the archbishops and paladins they had sent out were remaining silent. The senior priest turned to another archbishop, who was also there when the prophecy was declared, to see if he understood why the 5 great empires reacted the way they did. He didn't know either, but mentioned that the Holy Virgin might positively impact the 5 great empires. Another priest agreed and added that they should also think about the potential revenue from the Holy Virgin and pilgrimages. The priest who witnessed the prophecy concurred, saying the kingdom's choice was baffling from any angle. The senior priest asked for clarification and suggested that external pressure might be influencing their decision. The younger priest confirmed that this was exactly his suspicion, that the churches in the 5 great empires might be conspiring. After sharing their thoughts, the room went quiet. Moments later, the senior priest, astonished by the credibility of the suggestion, questioned why the churches would engage in such behavior. The younger priest admitted he was unsure, but one thing seemed apparent. The senior priest was eager to know what that was. The younger priest revealed that it looked like the churches feared that handing over the Holy Virgin would strengthen their church's influence. When he shared his suspicion, it caused a loud reaction among the others. He elaborated that the churches probably feared that surrendering the Holy Virgin would enhance the power of the goddess Gaia, so they aimed to use this situation to their benefit. Since the young priest's explanation seemed so sensible, even the oldest priest, who was usually skeptical, found himself needing to sit down to fully grasp the idea. But he was aware that the idea hadn't yet been put into action. The oldest priest understood that the 5 churches were supposed to follow the Holy Kingdom's directives, but he also knew they were quietly skeptical and often resisted. Another priest at the table mentioned that this might be just as the younger priest had described. He also pointed out that the 5 churches might be worried about losing their influence with the emergence of the Holy Virgin. Moreover, he was troubled by the hesitation of the 5 great kingdoms to accept the Holy Virgin's role. The oldest priest agreed that this hesitation was a serious issue and saw it in the same light as his colleagues. He then questioned whether they should try to contact Duke Diard once more. Meanwhile, at the Silver Cross Knight's base, Duke Diard was in a meeting with several high archpriests and the Knight Commander. Duke Diard observed the soldiers on the ground, suffering from severe internal injuries. One archpriest noted the critical condition of the soldiers. Duke Diard then asked the 3rd commander if he had informed the Holy Kingdom about their dire situation. Duke Diard explained that it was too risky to send someone, so he had opted to send a carrier pigeon instead. This made Duke Diard anxious, as he hadn't heard back yet. Suddenly, a bird appeared and landed in the commander's hands. He was relieved to finally receive a message from the Holy Kingdom. Duke Diard quickly read the note, surprised by its contents.